Last time this year, this century, and for all time, I would like to start this meeting of the Brookline Board of Selectmen.
Don't say never.
Yeah, don't say never.
But if I might have a minute, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I want to say how grateful I am both to Selectman Betsy DeWitt and our Selectman and Chair, Ken Goldstein. Ken's been with us for 2 terms, Betsy for 3 terms. You have both put in a huge amount of time and effort on the working on behalf of the town, and it takes more patience, I think, than many people realize sometimes to serve on this board, and we are sometimes the target of various people who are unhappy about one thing or another. So I want everyone to know, because I do appreciate the patience and the hard work that both of you have put in on the board.
Thank you, Selectman Daley. I appreciate that very much, and you've been an incredible mentor to me. So you've really paved the way for me, and I appreciate you're now in your 4th term, and that is trumps everything you just said about us. So.
And I think it's fair to say that we are all reassured, at least I am very reassured about the fact that we are not, when we're gone, there will be good folks who will fill our shoes, but also that they will have very good, strong leadership and mentors with the 3 remaining selectmen. So I have great faith that there will be continuity.
Yes, and I, too, will add my congratulations on your moving on. To have 2 folks move on at the same time, that's a big hole on the board, a big loss of institutional memory, and really the 2 of you are a lot of the reason why I'm here. Both of you, and Nancy, really encouraged me to run. And I'll say that actually Ken's phone call, and there was another one, but Ken's phone call was really the one that put me over.
I take credit for it constantly, Neil. So, that's one of the achievements of my administration has been getting you on.
Right.
So,
so congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'll be sad.
Thank you. If you guys will indulge us, I think maybe at the end of the meeting, I've got a parting remark I might make, and Betsy, I think you maybe do the same.
I might have something to say.
All right. But at any rate, I'd like to begin this meeting of the April 28th, 2015 Board of Selectmen, and we'll begin with announcements and updates. Selectman DeWitt.
I have a few.
Who's going to do them?
Yeah, that's
Well, you guys are going to have to sort that one out.
That's a big hole.
I'll offer you my template. Tomorrow night, Wednesday, from 7 to 9:30 p.m., the Brookline League of Women Voters, the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance, and the Town Meeting Members Association will host a candidates night for selectmen and school committee candidates here in the Selectmen's Hearing Room, Town Hall. As I understand it, that is candidates only, and the override questions will not be discussed. Also tomorrow evening, Steps to Success is holding a fundraiser, Step Up for Our Stars, honoring long-term supporters Alan and Cecily Morrison. I guess everyone, I hope, remembers that Alan was the former chair of the school committee. This will be at 6 p.m. at the Clay Observatory, Dexter Southfield School. There is a ticket that you have to acquire, but they're available at the door. And STEPS, as I hope all know, is the program that really serves low-income kids in our Brookline school system, and we're very proud of it. So, on Thursday, from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Brookline Senior Center, Brookline Can is hosting a candidates event to meet candidates for selectmen and school committee, but it will also include a forum on the override questions at 5 p.m. So this is from 4 to 6, and the override forum apparently is specifically scheduled at 5 o'clock. And there will be an opportunity for presentations from the yes and the no's, as well as encouraging questions from the audience. Finally, next Tuesday, May 5th, is Municipal Election Day. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m., and there will be, I gather, no selectmen's meeting that night. But for folks who, for whatever reason, cannot make it on May 5th, Tuesday, or if you just are so impatient you can't wait, the town clerk's office on the first floor of Town Hall welcomes absentee voters, and there are some extended hours. On Monday through Wednesday, they're open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Thursday, this week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and on Friday this week, from 8 a.m. till 2 p.m. Actually, there will be Saturday hours, 9 a.m. till 2 p.m., and the last opportunity for an absentee ballot is noon on Monday, May 4th. Those are my announcements.
Thank you, Selectman DeWitt. Anything further?
Yeah, can I just add that I'm also doing an information session on the override questions in the basement part, the lower church at St. Mary's on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, which is, no, any age welcome to come. And there is going to be one or two representatives from the no side, so I think I will be taking the yes side of the discussion. And so it should be interesting, and people who have questions, still confused, should come to that if they can't make one of the other sessions.
Good.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on, there's no one signed up for public comment, so we'll go right to our miscellaneous calendar. The first item for consideration is the question of approving the minutes of our April 21st, 2015 meeting. I had no edits to it. know
I did have some,
Selectman Daley had
yeah,
some,
that I
and
sent
these are
around.
hers. Anybody else had edits? So just one set of revisions. I move that we approve the minutes of the April 21st, 2015 meeting as amended. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Next, we go on to miscellaneous item B, which is the question of approving and executing a temporary license agreement with the Brookline Farmers Market for use of the Center Street West parking lot for the Farmers Market beginning Thursday, June 18th, 2015 through October 29th, 2015. Who is presenting for this? Oh, Andy, I saw him there. Oh, there he is. Come ahead, Andy, come right to the
And
right to
while
the
we're
front,
waiting for him
please.
to come up, I just have to say, this is a very important, to me, symbolic thing that says there will be spring, there will be food harvested. Is that a promise you can make?
I'm hoping for fresh fruits and veggies, just like you
Okay.
are, so, and all the other specialty offerings that they have. I think what you see is what you get. It's relatively the same agreement that we recycle every year. The new market management team did a great job last year getting their feet under them. There was a little bit of trial by fire, as I understand it. And they're back again this year, so we didn't scare them away. And what's exciting is they're looking to offer, or to accept rather, SNAP benefits, which is something that the market hasn't previously done, so hopefully that'll expand access to the market to folks
Oh,
who
great.
otherwise might not have them.
I just want to say that for a lot of people who sometimes shop at some of the other farmers markets, I always hear compliments about the Brookline one.
It's very popular.
And, yeah.
Okay, been a successful program, and happy to continue it. So without further ado, I move that we approve and execute a temporary license agreement with the Brookline Farmers Market to use the Center Street West Roxbury lot for, I'm sorry, West parking lot, West Roxbury, West Roxbury on the brain here. West parking lot for temporary operations of a farmer's market on Thursdays beginning June 18, 2015 through October 29, 2015, hours 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Next is miscellaneous item C. It's the question of a change order, which in this case is a decrease in the amount of $703.88 for work completed by GVC Inc. in connection with the Lawrence School classroom addition. Mr. Quigley, always happy to see a decrease.
Good evening, folks. There's three items on this change order. One is to change metal furring to metal studs at the electrical panel in the corridor, $460 increase. The other was a change in the core cylinder door hardware for $411 to make it consistent with other town buildings. And the final item on this change order is a credit for utility usage, just under $1,600 for a net credit of $703.88.
Any questions on this? This gift horse, I move that we approve change order number 3 in the amount of $703.88 credit for work completed by GVW Inc. in connection with the Lawrence School Classroom Edition. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
May I ask Mr. Quigley a question about this project? Because
course.
I did actually, someone in a meeting that I attended recently said that they weren't clear that it was on time. So is this project on time? What's your,
We've lost about a month owing to the weather.
yeah, I remember.
So we're still, I anticipate us being complete probably the end of June.
Okay.
And the weather just, we basically lost the month of February.
Sure, but they'll be ready for fall.
Oh, we're anticipating to be complete, as I said, towards the end of June.
Good.
Moving on to miscellaneous D, question of approving change order number 3 in the amount of $58,156.69 to be, for work to be completed by Lambrian Construction Corporation in connection with the renovation of the old Lincoln School. Mr. Quigley again.
This is a collection of various change order items. I can run through them quickly if you wish.
Please.
And the first one is to revise the layout of the HVAC system in the basement corridor for $11,725. This is the dehumidification system in the basement. Unfortunately, when we started opening up walls and stuff to run the ductwork, we ran into a lot of obstructions. And there was a lot of work that needed to be done to reroute the ductwork. So that's what that's all about. The next item is added structural steel framing in room A002A for the air handling unit in the amount of $8,220. This again is for that dehumidification system. This is the air handling unit in the basement. It's on an elevated slab, and the added steel is required to evenly distribute the weight of the HVAC equipment in that room, and was not included in the contract documents. ACC number 1, relocation at the front of the building, $25,105. This contract document showed this in the rear of the building. There's no real good place to put it. It's a noisy unit, and upon further review, the design team determined the location as planned would not be in compliance with the noise ordinance. So after a lot of study, they recommended relocating the unit to the front of the building, adjacent to the existing generator. Condensate water line, $1,423, room O2A. The condensate water line now empties into the existing waste line. This was the old girls' shower room. And it was thought that all of the little floor drains had been cut and capped. When we got under there, they weren't cut and capped. They need to be cut and capped, so they need to be deactivated, so that's what this is for. New World Work and Science Room and Teachers Room, $12,462.89. This is the science room and the adjacent teachers' room to replace the existing old sinks and cabinets which were in disrepair and not handicap accessible. And this is to replace them in those areas. The next item is the credit for $991 to retain existing sprinkler heads in the guidance suite. It was determined they could be reused and not have to be replaced. Next item, $10,115.47 is for added boiler controls. This was, the contract included a new boiler, but no new controls for that because of budget considerations during design. And it was felt that since we're getting one new boiler, now would be an appropriate time to upgrade the controls so that we can be sure that we have a fully functional and maintenance-free heating system. The next item is a credit for utility usage in the amount of just under $17,000. It's fairly self-explanatory. That's for heat and gas and electric use. Next item was $3,958 to abate the mechanical shaft. New piping to be installed in an old mechanical chase. Upon opening the chase, it was found to have had asbestos materials in it, which needed to be abated. Girls' room 003 piping, $2,000. Upon demolition of the old bathroom, a vent pipe was found in conflict with the new bathroom layout. The bathrooms are all being relayed out for both handicapped accessibility and to meet building codes and to provide staff bathrooms. The vent pipe needed to be relocated. And finally, in the boys' bathroom, again, this project, because of budget concerns, we're trying to reuse as much of the existing systems as possible. So we're connecting into old water piping and what have you, and sometimes when we open walls, we find that they leak. So we have to do repairs on existing water piping that's not being replaced.
Mr. Quigley, the millwork in the science classroom, it sounds like that wasn't exactly our fault that
No, it wasn't our fault. The contractor demolished it inadvertently. It was to remain. However, there was no, you couldn't put the old stuff back. And the old stuff basically was non-functional, and it wasn't handicapped accessible, so it seemed to be an appropriate time, since it was gone anyhow,
yeah.
to replace it and upgrade it. And actually, a third of that is a request of the school, because the new teachers, a third of this particular change order has actually nothing to do with that. It's an adjacent room where the teachers' break room is, and this existing sink was about that high off the ground. It must have been used by younger children at some point.
Yeah.
So the request from the school department was to replace that at the same time.
Do we get any credit from the contractor for their error?
No. We didn't.
That was my thought as well when I read through this. I
We
think
get
if,
charged for every screw and gasket.
yeah, no, if they demolished something they weren't supposed to, then, I think they need to do some of the work for free, to put the new stuff in. There needs to be a certain portion of it that they,
Well, I did bring this up with him, and I am working on some credit back, but it's not going to be a lot, I don't think. So I did bring this up with him the past couple of days.
well, it concerns me because I think, if he makes other mistakes,
He did in the bathroom, and we're getting new ceramic tile on a wall that was not called for, and he is not getting any reimbursement for that. So I think it's kind of a difficult situation because the old home ec equipment in there was from the 1960s. And basically to put it, it's not like he could put it back. He made an error in taking it out. And I think that, all of the contractors on the job, including the subcontractor, are working diligently. I think they're doing a good job. And, it's an unfortunate situation, but the town is going to get value added on it. We're going to get handicapped accessible cabinetry and sinks, and so it's a benefit that we'll be getting.
Except it's a structure that may not be used for this purpose for a very long time. We may need it for about 5 years. I'm disappointed. I would think we were entitled to some credit for it. If you think you can get some kind of a concession from them, I would be willing to hold this for a couple, for our next meeting, but.
Can I just ask a question? Because what I think I heard in part was that Mr. Quigley was getting some in-kind, let's call it, compensation from the contractor. It seems to me you have to be careful about too much micromanagement.
Yep, I understand.
So,
That's why I put it to you as a question. If you think you can get some concession from them, maybe we should hold this. If you think that that's a futile effort, then
Well, I would ask you to do this. I mean, I did get a revision to this today, but it came late, and I haven't had a chance to review it. So he's definitely offered up something here. It's not going to, it's probably a small amount in the scheme of the whole thing. But again, keep in mind, of that $12,000, a third of that has nothing to do with his error.
I get it.
That's, a request of the school department. I think it was a legitimate one in the adjacent room. So I would ask you to approve this if you think you can. The building commission did.
I understand.
And if I can bring back a credit next month, I will do so. I mean, it's going to be something. I don't know what it's going to be at this point.
Okay. Board okay with moving this?
Okay.
All right. I move that we approve change order number 3 in the amount of $58,156.69 for work to be completed by Lambrian Construction Corporation in connection with the renovation of the old Lincoln School. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
I'm going to abstain.
And I vote aye. Item E on the miscellaneous calendar is the question of approving change order number 7 in the amount of $33,056.83 for elevator modernization at the Lawrence and Pierce School. Mr.
Yes, the
Quigley.
existing fire alarm system is not code compliant regarding the elevator at the Pierce School because it does not support fire recall. So this is a change to provide a new notifier panel, which will give us future flexibility as well as bringing the elevator recall up to code.
There was a notation in the write-up here that I'm guessing was an error. The second paragraph, the subject project was awarded to Enterprise Equipment in the amount of $415,000 and is part of the overall park project at Fisher Hill. I assume this has nothing to do with Fisher Hill, right?
No, that is...
Okay, I didn't know if it was mixed up in the budget or something like that, and I was missing something. But this is just at Pierce School,
Yes,
not at Lawrence?
no.
Okay. Questions, board members? I move that we approve change order number 7 in the amount of $33,056.83 for work to be performed by Enterprise Equipment in connection with elevator modernization at Lawrence and Pierce School. Well, just Pierce School, though. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco? Aye. I'll vote aye.
Okay, can I just
Thank you
ask,
ver-
did we vote C?
Yes,
Your vote is...
We did take
Yeah,
a vote?
we did.
Okay.
We did.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Item F is the question of accepting a grant in the amount of $4,987.28 from the Executive Office of Public Safety in connection with pedestrian and bicycle safety enforcement grant. Chief.
Good evening. This is another one in the line of grants that we've been able to get through the Executive Office of Public Safety to help us in our traffic efforts. This amount of money would allow us to go a long way towards offsetting some of the cost when we try to increase the safety of the bicyclists and pedestrians in town. And just as a sign of the progress that we've made over the last couple of years, from 2013 to 2014, we saw a reduction in just under 30% of accidents involving bicycles. So we hope to try to get that number even lower this year. We hope this grant will allow us to put officers into the place where the violations are occurring and we can make it even safer than we already have. We always try to do a better job.
Okay. Questions, comments from board members?
I was just going to ask, how many areas are we talking about here? Is it 4 intersections? Is it 40 intersections that we consider high traffic?
We know some that we normally do all the time would be in the mornings. You'd see us on Beacon Street, Lower Beacon, Kent Street, going into the medical center, Brookline Ave. In the evening, it's on the outbound sides that we'll concentrate on. We know that even though we do a lot of enforcement, a lot of visibility in those areas, you still get bicycles that come down that don't want to stop. We would do it based on our complaints and based on some of the violations that officers see that we'll assign our people to. We do move them around. They are assigned directed patrols based on some of the analysis that we do.
And if I can just comment anecdotally anyway, I have had fewer experiences with bicyclists running lights and being, let's say, generally not compliant with rules. I hope that that's partly a result of the effort you folks have put in.
We like to think we're part of it, but I think by stopping a lot of the violations as they occur and calling it to the people's attention and maybe writing a warning and giving some education, they see that we're out trying to make sure that everybody gets to work and gets home safely, and we have seen an increase in compliance. We even got that kind of comment from the bike group in Brookline, that they can see themselves because they go out and they've been up on, I know that in particular, this one person was up on Upper Harbor Street and said that from one period during, like, say, 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning, did not see any violations by bicyclists. They were stopping. So that's a good sign, that they're
Yeah,
seeing that we're out there.
right. Keep it up.
Okay, anything further? I move that we accept a grant in the amount of $4,987.28 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security in connection with fiscal year 2015 pedestrian and bicycle safety enforcement and equipment grant to be used to pay hire officers to enforce bicycle and pedestrian safety. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
I'll vote aye as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Now we have the question of reappointing Director of Finance Stephen Cirillo to the Retirement Board for a
We had
three-year
a,
term.
Whoops. I think you're missing
I think
the
we skipped.
fire department.
I'm very sorry. Let's go back to
Training
G.
grant.
I checked it off too soon. Question of, so G is the question of accepting a grant from the UIASI in the amount of up to $6,000 for overtime costs associated with firefighter training to be used in the use of chemo-bio multi-threat protective suit. Chief Ford.
Good evening. Well, we received quite a bit of equipment and training from UASI, Urban Area Security Initiative. It's run through the Homeland Security in the country, and it's out of Boston. We're a UASI community. Typically, in these days, they don't cover us for the actual training, the time of the men. We have to cover that. In this particular case, they've gone out and purchased some of these new chemical suits for each department. We've received 4 of them, and they're offering us to pay for our guys to be trained, one company, in the use of these suits. So what we did with this grant is really a little unknown figure, and it's approximately $6,000. We took it, how much it would cost us for those backfill or overtime firefighters for a whole company to go and be trained. We would pay them, and then UASI would reimburse us for whatever we expend.
Good. Selectman Daley.
I'm just wondering what kind of events these might be used for.
A chemical event, a chemical threat. A lot of these might be something in the subway. One of our companies does respond to one of the T's down below. That's going to be one of the uses of these suits if there were an incident, as it happened in
We
other
don't have
places.
any subways in Brookline.
What's that?
None of the,
No, we have a company, Engine 5 responds out on the line box to one of the subways in Boston.
Oh,
So they would be there automatically. But it's other events. It could be a chemical event outside. It could be a chemical event anywhere. It could be, their Siberni suits are chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive. So they have a lot of different features in this. And we would use these suits in different hazmat situations.
didn't we vote to be a nuclear-free town at some point?
I hope we never have to use these suits. Selectman Franco.
I don't want to use them, but I have to say, I do want them to, I want the people who use them to know how to put them on when they do.
Right.
So I know training is one of the initiatives that you brought to Brookline when you became chief. I'm wondering if this is going to be a recurring training that some of our firefighters go through, or this is sort of a unique circumstance and a one-off type training?
This particular training is more of a unique circumstance. The UASI community, what happens, the committee picks a direction, develops a direction to go with. So it's a lot of chief officers together have sat down and said, we need to do, for our chemical protection, our hazmat protection, we need to go down this road. So they've gotten to this point where they're purchasing these suits in a limited quantity. but this is really isolated, this particular thing. So what would happen in the end is we basically would have a company on duty at any time, and that company, whatever group it is, they would be trained in the use of these suits.
Okay. I move that we accept a grant from UASI in the amount of $6,000 for overtime costs associated with firefighter training and the use of chem-bio multi-threat protective suits. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
I'll vote aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We'll see you in a few minutes. Now we get to the question of reappointing Director of Finance Stephen Cirillo to the Retirement Board for a term of 3 years. I don't see him here. I don't think we need to see him here. I don't have any objection to this. Does anybody have any comment or question?
No, I think he's been looking after our interests very well in that position.
I agree. I move that we reappoint Director of Finance Stephen Cirillo to the Retirement Board for a 3-year term. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
I also vote aye. And we now have 1, 2, 4 temporary alcoholic beverage licenses, which I'll do in omnibus fashion. So I move that we grant a temporary wine and malt beverage license to the Annunciation Greek Orthodox Cathedral of New England in connection with a bridal shower to be held on May 6, 2015, from 6 p.m. to 12 p.m. at 162 Goddard Avenue. I further move that we grant a temporary alcoholic beverage license for town property to the Laz Anderson Auto Museum to be held in connection with the following events at 15 Newton Street. A wine and malt beverage license for museum exhibit opening reception on May 7th, 2015, from 5:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. And an all kinds alcoholic beverage license for a wedding reception on May 9th, 2015, from 5:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. And an all kinds non-sales license for a birthday party on May 13th, 2015, from 6 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. All in favor of those temporary alcoholic beverage licenses, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. That concludes our miscellaneous calendar. We're on to our main calendar. Item number 5 on the main calendar is the question of authorizing the filling of 7 firefighter vacancies. Chief Ford again.
Good evening.
Good evening.
At this time, the fire department is budgeted for 154 positions. We're down 4 positions at this moment in time. We do expect to have 3 more vacancies by sometime in June. One of them is an absolute guarantee. They all are. We will be experiencing 3 more. And occasionally, we have an unexpected come along. What I'm seeking permission to do is to start the process. It's a very lengthy process to put together what's called a requisition through civil service, get the list of names of new candidates, go through the background application process, the background check, the interview process. It takes quite a bit of time before we narrow our field down, at which point I would come back to you with the final field of candidates that we wanted to fill for the 7 vacancies that we are expecting. We always get a few extra names just in case there is an unexpected, if I have an 8th by then. But when I come back to you, I would have that. We would be solidified in the number we had and who we wanted to move forward with.
Good. Mr. Kleckner?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to remind the board, and I have reminded the chief, that there is a position that will be reduced from the budget in the event that the override failed next week. But I think because of the need to go forward in advance, given the civil service hiring process, I was comfortable having the fire chief seek this list at this time of the full 7, and we can always reduce that down the road if necessary.
Sound reasonable? I won't be here to deal with that
No,
consequence.
But my observation is that it's a very lengthy process, and if you don't start it now, he may not have the recruits available at the time that he needs them, so it's important to initiate it.
Chief, does this take into account any retirements that you're expecting soon in fiscal year 2016? Oh,
Fiscal 15.
I'm sorry, I understand that this is for your current vacancies.
Right.
But I imagine you can anticipate a few retirements coming up in the next fiscal year, and
I wouldn't be looking that far at this time, because we wouldn't be able to hire those individuals until the vacancies occur. Just like these 7, if for some reason, 1 or 2 of the anticipated ones change their mind, I wouldn't move forward with those hirings. We can't move up to 156, although you do have the authority to allow that. That would be okay. But, no, we wouldn't do that. So I wouldn't be looking that far forward to future retirements.
are you expecting
As
substantial
far as
number
I
of
see,
retirements in FY16, though?
I haven't looked at the entire year of FY16, but this is all I see in the near future.
Selectman Goldstein's feeling generous on his last night.
Do I hear 157?
Thanks. So I move that we authorize the filling of 7 vacancies in the position of firefighter in the fire department. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Next, we have some promotions that are proposed for the police department, effective May 4th, 2015. Chief O'Leary? He's gone missing.
He's got
There he is.
folks out there, I do believe.
Oh, I hear
Mobs of them, my
feet
bet
on too.
is. Yes, right.
I apologize for my tardiness this evening. Traffic in Cambridge is difficult at best.
you were missed.
Take a couple of minutes for the crowd to come in, if you don't
That's
mind.
okay,
Okay.
Chief. Take as much time as you need. I didn't mean to embarrass him. Quite a turnout.
Well, good evening.
Good evening, Chief.
And thanks for having us here tonight. And I think it's especially nice to do these round of promotions in front of this board, because this board stuck with us through a lot of negotiations, and you'll see the first choice that we're making for deputy superintendent based on the new rules that the board voted on and allowed us to go forward with. And I'm sure you'll agree with our selection. And it gives us a great honor, Superintendent Mark Morgan and I, to bring these 5 candidates in front of you for promotion to the police department, to different ranks in the police department. We don't take promotions lightly at all in the department. We always look down the road with our promotions. But having said that, we also take a look at a person's career, what they've done, how they've performed in the police department, what they've done when they haven't been asked, what their records look like on everything from attendance at work to quality investigations, quality of work that they do, and the ability to get along with people, because really that's the bottom line of our job, is that we have to go about our jobs getting along with people, treating people with respect and dignity, and they in turn give that back to us. This day and age, with everything that's happening, especially in the last couple of days down in Baltimore, I don't have to really go into any more detail with that, but it's something that's on all of our minds. I think everybody here in this room, the officers here especially, and it's something that we want to help end and make not only Brookline, but our whole area a better place. So having said that, the superintendent and I went through a lot of interviews to come down to these 5. Actually, there's 18 interviews in all. And we had a lot of quality candidates that made our decisions very hard. But I think, and I hope that you will agree, and I hope that these 5, I have faith in these 5 officers, showing that we made the right decisions, because we didn't do it without losing some sleep over it because of the competition that we had. But that speaks very well of the department and of the hires that we've made and that you've made, and I think what our officers think about the work and the quality of work that they do and the pride that they take in their work. And I think it'll show in these. So, to get to a couple of the promotions right now, our first promotion, as you know, when we made the deputy superintendents and we limited the rank of captain, part of the discussion that was done was that we offered the jobs to all of our existing captains, and they all accepted. And present here in the room today are 3 of them. Deputy Superintendent John O'Leary, Deputy Superintendent Michael Grotman, and Deputy Superintendent Miles Murphy. They're seated here in the second row. But tonight we also have the opportunity to pick our first one from the rank of lieutenant. And I don't think that this lieutenant is any stranger to you, as he's been in front of the board for a number of awards. It's Lieutenant Andrew Lipson. And I want to tell you a little bit about him. He was appointed to the police department on September 8th of 1998, graduated from the police academy, and served in a number of capacities within the patrol division. After serving as a patrol officer in the patrol division, he moved on to the detective division until he was promoted to sergeant on December 3rd of 2005. As a sergeant, he served in both the community service division and then back in the patrol division, and he was eventually promoted 3 years later to lieutenant. His first assignment as a lieutenant was in command of the 3rd Platoon, which is the overnight platoon in the police department, and then he stayed in there for about a year, and then we moved him into detectives, and he took over the night detective division. And I think you've heard of the work that detective division has done, and that night detectives, on some of the accommodations that have come over here, how they've built cases based on technology, based on investigating cybercrime and things like that. And Andy has really been the lead in getting the people to do that work. And I think it shows in the quality of arrest, our crime rate going down, and Andy was a big part of that. A couple of years ago, he was chosen as Police Officer of the Year as a lieutenant by his peers, and he also has volunteered, and he is a supervisor in our special response team, and he plays a large part in the unit's development, along with Deputy Superintendent Miles Murphy, and that unit's development and where it's gone in the organization. He was raised in Brookline. He graduated from high school from Buckingham, Brown, and Nichols, and he obtained a Bachelor's of Arts degree in History from Trinity College, a Master's degree in Criminal Justice from Western New England. He also attended the Police Executive Research Forum Management Institute for Police in 2010. And he's here tonight with his wife, Wanda, his father, Roger, his daughter, Olivia, and his son, Benjamin. So I offer Andrew Lipson as promotion to Deputy Superintendent. Next, I want to introduce to you Sergeant Kevin Mealy. We're recommending Sergeant Kevin Mealy to be promoted to Lieutenant. Sergeant Kevin Mealy was appointed to the Police Department on January 10th, 1991, and when he graduated from the Police Academy, he had a number of assignments within the Patrol Division, and eventually began serving in the Detective Division. He was promoted to Sergeant on December 3rd, 2003, and served as a patrol supervisor on various shifts. And most recently, as you know, we had an unfortunate going on with our details, and when we rewrote our policy on details and how we wanted it handled, we selected Kevin Mealy to be the officer in charge of the detail unit. I will say that he's been running that for more than 2 years now, or about 2 years. It's been running great. We've had no complaints. We audit it once a month, and a lot of that credit goes to Kevin Mealy's skills. But beyond that, he's also showed a lot of really distinctive work. And one in particular I want to tell you about. And because of this, he was awarded the George L. Hanna Award for Bravery, based on his actions on September 2nd, 1999. If you remember, back on that date, two officers pulled into the lower lot at Lars Anderson to check on a car that they saw had two guys sleeping in it. They approached the car and started to identify the operator. As they were discussing what they were going to do, the car took off out of the lot, down Goddard Ave, eventually onto Hammond Pond Parkway. When it entered into Newton, the car made a U-turn at the lower mall, and the two officers in their cruiser pulled in behind them. Car stopped, but before the officers could even get out of the car, the two subjects in the car in front of them came out with guns and started firing on our two officers in their cruiser. They started to return fire when Patrol Officer Kevin Mealy showed up behind them. He took cover behind the car and he engaged the two subjects as they were running by the officers that were in their cruiser. He was able to hit and wound one of the subjects and take him into custody. That subject that they took into custody, we found out that he had fled from our offices because he was wanted for the homicide of two women, as well as the wounding of his girlfriend a couple of days earlier in Atlanta, Georgia. About 9 months later, the second subject was apprehended, or he was apprehended. He committed suicide before the police could apprehend him in an apartment in Roxbury. Sergeant Mealy, for that, like I said, got the George L. Hanna Award for Bravery, which is a statewide recognition by the governor. Sergeant Mealy grew up in Brookline. He graduated from Brookline High School. He received his bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Northeastern University and his master's in criminal justice from Western New England University. Now, I want to move on to three sergeants. And these three officers have not been promoted before in the police department. This is their first step. It's the most critical step to get promoted to sergeant because it's the first time that you now supervise and are responsible for a group of officers under your command. Not only do they have to make sure that the officers under their command know how to do the job and do the job right, they get to complete reports correctly, and I always tell them that they also got to keep their officers out of trouble. They got to make sure that they do the right thing, and if they're going down the wrong path, they ought to make the corrections on the time that they see it. And I think each one of them heard that from me already this past week. So, and they'll hear it again before they're out on the street. But the first officer will be Officer Brian Sutherland to police sergeants. Brian Sutherland was appointed to the police department on September 8th, 1998, and upon graduation from the academy, he took various shifts and assignments within the patrol division. He worked all three shifts, he worked in a lot of different assignments, and he did his work day in and day out. While he's assigned in those, when he took those assignments, his work was recognized by his supervisors, and he was put up for and awarded several commendations for excellent police work. In November of 2013, he asked to go to the traffic division. We assigned him in there, and he is currently assigned there as an accident investigator. Brian Sutherland grew up in Brookline, graduated from Brookline High School. He attended Kent School for a prep year, and later received his bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Connecticut. He then received his master's degree in criminal justice from Western New England University. And Kevin Mealy is here with his wife, Shelley, his sons, Patrick, Matthew, and Nicholas, his father, Ed, his mother, Ellie, and they all came here to congratulate Brian. Excuse me, I think I goofed. I guess I goofed too, obviously. I just introduced Kevin Mealy's family. I apologize, Kevin and Shelley, but I'd like to introduce Brian Sutherland's family. Okay, Brian? Brian's here with his wife Tracy, his son Connor, his daughter Mackenzie, and his daughter Addison. So, welcome. He's here also with his mother Ann and his father Alan. The next officer I'd like to recommend for promotion to police sergeant is Russell O'Neill. Russell O'Neill joined the department in June of 2006. He graduated from the Lowell Police Academy in November of that year, and he was assigned to the patrol division. While assigned to the patrol division, he worked several different assignments and patrol shifts, and during his time in patrol, he too received numerous commendations for excellent police work. In January of 2013, he was assigned to the evening shift as a member of the detective division. During his time in this assignment, he has demonstrated his skills in the investigation of a variety of crimes. He too is a member of our special response team, and he also serves in another capacity as captain in the Army National Guard. During his tenure in the police department, actually it was just about right after his graduation from the academy, he was deployed to Iraq, where he commanded a platoon of officers responsible for finding and neutralizing improvised explosive devices. He received several awards during his service in Iraq, including a Bronze Star. Officer O'Neill graduated from Brookline High School in 2000. He obtained his bachelor's degree in sociology from UMass Amherst and his master's in criminal justice from UMass Lowell. And Russell is here, I'll get this right, Russell, with his wife Christine, his daughter Brooke, his stepmother Sarah, his father Steve, his brother Danny. They're all here to say congratulations to, hopefully congratulations to Russell. It's up to you.
That's right. Got a good feeling about it, but
Our fifth officer, and definitely not the end, I hope, but Andrew Amendola, promotion to police sergeant. Patrol Officer Andrew Amendola was appointed to the department in January of 2006. He graduated from the Lowell Police Academy in November of that year. Upon his graduation, he was assigned to the Patrol Division, where he worked in multiple assignments while on various shifts. During his time in patrol, he received several commendations for excellent police work. In 2010, as a member of the U.S. Army Reserve, he was deployed to Afghanistan, where he served for more than a year. During his deployment, he was wounded in action and awarded a Purple Heart. In 2012, he asked for and received an assignment to our walk-and-talk unit, and with the exception of a 9-month stint in the Detective Division, he remained in walk-and-talk until March of this year. In March of this year, we assigned him to the Detective Division, where he currently serves. And Officer Amendola also is a member of our Special Response Team. He graduated from Norwood High School in 2002. He received a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from UMass Boston in 2006, and he's currently attending UMass Lowell for a master's degree in criminal justice. Andrew is here with his wife Christine, his daughter Gianna, and his brother, Officer Joe Amendola of the Brookline Police Department. If you vote, as I hope you vote, it's going to result in a couple of more changes within the police department. Our intention is, if all goes well, is that Deputy Superintendent Lipson will move to take over the patrol division on Monday of next week. Deputy Miles Murphy, who's been in charge of the patrol division for the last 6 years, will move to the traffic division. Deputy Michael Grotman, who's been in traffic division for 11 years, which is a long time to serve there, basically because I asked him to stay there that long. He will move over to the community service division. Deputy John O'Leary will stay in the detective division. And that will be the round of the promotions and assignments at top, if the board so agrees. So, I'm
Thank-
done. Thank you.
thank you, Chief. Let me just say that we take what you do very seriously, Chief O'Leary, and we take the analysis that you and Superintendent Morgan and Deputy Grotman, Deputy Murphy, Deputy O'Leary have, the work that you've done in analyzing the need for promotions and who is most qualified for them. We trust your decision-making on this, and gentlemen, the fact that these leaders of your force have chosen you speaks very highly in our minds. I'm familiar with some of you, or at least by reputation, and let me say, as far as I'm concerned, that these promotions are well-deserved and well-earned. I want to thank you for your dedication to the town. I want to thank you for all that you give to it, and just like we thank new recruits in their first day, thank you to that extent, but you've shown the additional initiative to give your all to the job, to give your all to the citizens of Brookline, and to really ascend in the ranks of our police department. I'm particularly pleased to see so many Brookline High School graduates. I know Selectman Franco and I are also Brookline High School graduates, and we take it as a personal pleasure when we see people who went through the same program that we went through, who have remained in this town and continue to devote their energies to it. That gives us a great deal of pride. And I wholeheartedly and strongly will support the recommendations of the chief and the other department leaders. Any other comment from members? Selectman DeWitt?
I can only second what Selectman Goldstein has said, but I also want to say that, it's funny, we keep talking about this huge increase in enrollment in our schools. And interestingly enough, I believe it has quite a bit to do with safety and people's feeling of comfort in our town. In Brookline, you can walk the streets, you feel safe. You can walk around at night, you feel safe. And it's, in a way, an invisible affirmation that what you folks are doing is the right thing. And I also want to comment, and it goes back to the chief's opening comment about these examples of racial profiling that we are hearing about in the public media. I know that our Brookline statistics are very clear that that is not going on. I'm not going to quote them, but they're available, and you can go online and see them. The other thing that is of interest to me is that Brookline was cited by a researcher, I think, from California. I'm not even clear anymore what the subject matter of the research was, but Brookline was ranked at the top of a good, strong community policing force. And I think for somebody totally outside who had no axe to grind or issues to raise, to give Brookline that sort of affirmation and accolade is very important, and I think the community needs to know that. We're very proud of our police officers. We feel safe in Brookline, and I always have to add that we appreciate very much the families of all of our officers, because those are the people who provide the support system that give the rest of us our protection. And so I am very grateful to all of them as well.
Anyone else? Selectman Daley?
Yeah, no, I just want to say, it's always, the promotions are always fun for us, and it's delightful to hear about the many, many accomplishments of these gentlemen here in the front row, and I am happy to add my vote to the yeses.
Good. Selectman Waschinsky?
And being the fourth one speaking, I won't say much more than to second all I've heard and congratulate you all and wish you the best of luck going forward.
Selectman Franco?
I will echo the comments of my fellow board members and say these are always happy occasions for us. So often we hear about problems with police forces, and the good side, the positive stories aren't reported. So to have us hear them and have the public have the opportunity to hear them as well is something that I'm very proud of and happy that occurs in this town. I will make my usual comment and say thank you for taking care of us and keeping us safe. Make sure that you keep yourselves safe and take care, and the best of luck in the future.
Great. And by the way, I meant no slight to Officer Amendola because she didn't graduate Brookline High School.
Oh, come on, there were two that
We
didn't.
forgive that. Well, Officer Lipson's honorary, I'd say. With great pride and pleasure, I move that we approve the following promotions within the Police Department effective May 4th, 2015. Detective Lieutenant Andrew Lipson to Deputy Superintendent, Sergeant Kevin Mealy to Lieutenant, Patrol Officer Brian Sutherland to Police Sergeant, Patrol Officer Russell O'Neill to Police Sergeant, Patrol Officer Andrew Amendola to Police Sergeant. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Congratulations.
Could I just ask the five to stand up and remove their badges, and could you ask someone from your family to come up and pin your new badge on you?
Take them off first.
Do it.
We got a wide angle lens? I know. Yeah, I'll introduce. I had the same thought, Selectman Daley. I didn't see David and Ron. Yep. I saw him before.
Yeah, they're just kind of standing in the back.
You can't do very much until the crowds.
Yeah, we'll wait a few minutes.
Pretty well timed. That email was well timed based on one of the responses.
When did we get that?
There goes our audience.
Will and David, why don't you come right up to the front row, because we're going to start in a minute.
Boy, really, clear out the room.
Yeah, no, just sit for now, but we'll introduce you in just a moment. Just wait for the room to clear a little bit.
But it's a little bit unclear what the lines are.
All right, I think we're ready. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to begin again. Agenda item number 5 is something which I'm very, very pleased to be, I'm sorry, 7 is very pleased to be introducing here today. It's the question of approving and executing a letter of intent with the USGA, the United States Golf Association, and also to authorize town administrator to convene a team for purposes of negotiating a certain definitive agreement, which we'll explain to you in a moment. So I know it's not obvious from the agenda, but what this is about is that the USGA, the U.S. Golf Association, has approached the country club about hosting a very major, world-renowned golf event in 2022. I know it seems a long way off, but planning for events of this size and of this stature require years of preparation. And this is something that has been done before in Brookline. The country club, as everybody knows, is historically extremely significant to the world. It was the host of some very important events golf events in the past, and also the place where the greatest game ever played was played. That's the Francis Ouimet story, of course, and the first country club in the United States. And personally, from my point of view, I'd be very, very proud of this town to host another event of that stature and to work with the USGA and the country club to make that happen. Now, of course, we're talking about an event that's very large in a community that doesn't host events of that size very often, and as a result, it requires a great deal of planning, not just a simple handshake with the town, but make sure that our affected departments, police, fire, building departments, recreation departments, are all on board, and that we're very clear on what the obligations and responsibilities will be. You should know that in the past, for the Ryder Cup and for previous U.S. Opens, the hosting of a major golf event has involved using the Putterham Golf Course, the Robert Lynch course, as for staging and parking and for hospitality tents, and also Lars Anderson. So these are all things that will need to be worked out. Nobody expects that the town will not be compensated for those uses, and in fact, nobody expects that the town won't actually derive some benefit in the end from it. On the other hand, I don't think that this is something that we should be looking at, that the town should be looking at as an opportunity for windfall profits. I think it's an opportunity to host a very important event, to take center stage in the golf world for a week or so, and to showcase this to the community that we're so proud of, and to come out with some small compensation for what we give up in the process. So I hope you've had a chance to look at the letter of intent with the USGA, and you might have some comments or questions about it. But what I'd like to do is introduce two representatives of the country club who are here to put this into some greater context for us. So I think everybody knows David Shagg, who's the director David, wave your hand, who's the director and has been before us before, and probably fewer of you know Will Fulton, who, wave Will, who is, I don't know what your official title is, Will, but he's the member who is of the country club, who is really the point person on this right now. And both of them, I want to invite them to the podium to tell us about what the plans are.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here this evening. My name is Will Fulton, and I'm a member of the club, and I'm also on the board of the club. My job is in charge of making sure that anything that grows at the club grows correctly and it's green. It's all our grounds, which has been a huge challenge coming off this latest winter that we had. So, but I'm excited to be here tonight. It is an exciting time. I think it is a very exciting time for the town, and it's a very exciting time for the club. It's also a very exciting time for the USGA. Those are three organizations that we're hoping can come together. What we're really here tonight to talk about is just forming a group that can further pursue how this could look. And the USGA has come to us and they've said that they would love to come to the club in 2022. We don't do things without coming and working with the town. The town's an incredibly important part to the success of an event like this. About 2 years ago, we just came off of a major international event working with the town for the 2013 U.S. Amateur, which we had a tremendous number of amateur players, the best amateur players in the world, came in. My family was fortunate enough to host the winner. The winner stayed at our house for the week, Matt Fitzpatrick. So I know any U.S.
Must be
Open.
cause and effect, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, we also hosted 3 other players, so I guess they don't feel that way, but this one did in particular. And so the goal is to work collaboratively with the town and the USGA to see what this could look like going forward, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Will? Selectman Daley?
Okay, I've got to say, I'm not saying that I might not ultimately be supportive of this. I'm quite a skeptic at this point.
Okay.
I understand when we did the Ryder Cup that there was significant damage to the Putterham, and since that time, we have put considerable amount of money into the Putterham Golf Course.
Okay.
So I am not really excited about the possibility of tearing it up or having parking there or whatever it might be. Also, I will note that Lars Anderson Park is, this would be during a time, it's in June, I believe, early in June.
It is, yes.
So school is still in session at that time, and, there might be school groups that usually would be using that so that we would be taking the golf course offline and part of Lars Anderson. I'm not sure exactly what part, but I am concerned about the effects, so.
All right. So just to clarify, I want to make sure everybody understands, this is not a commitment to the event. This is a commitment to talk about if we can work problems just like what you're describing, see if we can work all those out. So we've taken great pains. In fact, Town Council has reviewed the letter of intent and had a whole round of edits to it. Several rounds of edits to it, to make sure that what we would be doing here today is just agreeing to have a discussion, not agreeing to anything binding. Questions? Selectman DeWitt?
Well, I think this is sort of a mixed blessing, but I can say in some very positive ways. I remember working with David Shagg for the Ryder Cup in 1999. I think the country club delivered on its commitments. We might not have known to ask for some things that we've learned since, and we might ask for now. So the learning experience, in my view, was a very favorable one and a positive one. And I think it's timely to mention that one of the legacies of the Ryder Cup is an annual tournament that supports the Brookline Youth Fund, which is about to occur. And has been happening ever since. And to me, that is a very important symbolic relationship that we have with the country club. So I believe that this is, there's 7 years between now and when it would happen. It seems to me we ought to be able to negotiate whatever we need in the way of assurances and that would mean restoration of any damage to the Putterham Golf Course or Lars Anderson or any other conditions that are appropriate. But I do believe that we have a good working relationship, and I feel very strongly that there are some benefits. I assume people will need hotel rooms, and therefore the town will gain some benefit. This is a one-week event, is that right?
Yes, it's 1 week.
Okay,
yes.
so one of the things you would need to commit to is make sure some people stay in Brookline and not everybody stays in Boston or some other place, and maybe even the Cleveland Circle Hotel will be finished by then, for all I know. Anyway, I think it's a balance, we need to balance interests here, and I would feel very strongly that it's worth pursuing this and negotiating an arrangement that everybody can feel is fair, and that leaves the town whole, and possibly provide some lasting benefits. And I don't know if you want to do another youth fund thing, but I felt that that was an extraordinary decision that was made, and I really need to confirm that it has been a commitment that's been maintained over all these years. So I think that's important.
Good, thank you. David, the Brookline, yes, go right ahead, I'm sorry.
The Brookline...
David, will you go right to the microphone, please, so that folks at home can hear you, too?
And Betsy, I do remember us working very closely in the beginning with the Community Relations Committee, that in the beginning, we were looking at each other like, what are we going to do? And in the end, we're hugging each other because there were so many things that we were able to accomplish. Every year since 2000, when the fund was started at $500,000 contribution from the country club, we've hosted an event that's raised in the area. We originally thought we'd start at $25,000. It's now raising $50,000 annually. The fund this year is very close to the $1 million mark. We were hoping to arrive at that in July. We hope the stock market cooperates. And the funding this year, we reached the highest level at $50,000 for funds for grants that are awarded to youth programs in the town of Brookline. So that is really, that wouldn't have been accomplished if it wasn't for the town and the club working together on something that we really didn't envision in the beginning. So that was a success point, and I would hope that we would find many of those when it comes to another championship.
By the way, on the subject of the condition of the Putterham course, you know, in very, very preliminary discussions with USGA and the country club, the hope and intent is that, not that we repaired damage that's done if it's used, but actually to leave the course in better condition. And I know the four of you don't play golf, I do, and we could stand in better condition at the
Then you have
Putterham course.
to commit yourself to check and make sure it's put back.
Selectman Franklin?
I will support a conversation about this and sort of reserve final judgment until I see a final package. I do want to flag, mostly for this board, that in our current CIP, we're projected to do some work at Lars Anderson, I think in fiscal year 17 and 19. So I would hope that should this tournament proceed, we will be able to coincide the planned work at Lars Anderson, so we don't spend money only to have to come back a couple years later and repair.
It's a great point. And it's, Lisa Paradis has already been involved, and as well as the pro at the golf course, and they're aware of that aspect of this as well.
Okay.
Selectman Waschinsky.
I'm not a golfer, but I have good memories of the whole Ryder Cup experience just as a citizen, is kind of before I got involved in town government. And I think overall, from just looking at it from the outside, it was a good experience. There was a fair amount of disruption, but I thought it was handled pretty well. So my interest in approaching this would be to make sure that we handle the disruptions in the right way. The town is made whole for any damage and perhaps even make a little money. Now, I notice it's been in the news that okay, so this is 2022, and then it's been in the news that potentially you could be hosting the Olympics in 2024. Does this have any bearing on that, or?
Yes, I think I can answer that. So the Olympics are, my sole focus, the club's sole focus right now is on the US Open. The Olympics, I think all of us, whether we're in your positions or not, there's a lot of conversations about the Olympics, but the Olympics haven't been obviously assigned to Boston yet. From the club's perspective, and maybe I can just touch on three things on the Olympics, because I think it's important. We haven't had any conversations with the Olympic Committee at all. There was a phone call that was made over a year ago. It was made saying, would you be interested in discussing the Olympics if they were to come to Boston? We said we'd be interested in discussing them. The next thing we know, we're in the book that goes out saying that we're going to be the place to host the golf event for the Olympics, which, as you know, just being here 7 years early for this event, the amount of coordination it takes with the town, with the USGA, and then they slate us in there, that was never our intent. So that, in the golf world, that came out that, geez, if the Olympics go to Boston, they're going to go to the country club. That is by no means our intent. And so our sole focus right now is on the US Open. We haven't talked to the Olympic Committee yet. But the most important thing I want you to take from that is that we're here talking to you now because this partnership is so important. We can't and won't do this without you being excited about it. No more than you couldn't force the club to do an Open. It has to work together. So we're not going to go talk to the Olympics about doing anything with the Olympics without this level of coordination with the town. So we haven't been approached by the committee. When we do get approached by the committee, if it comes to Boston, we will come back to this group or some of the spokesperson of this group, and we'll deal with the town and talk to the town.
Well, part of my reason for being concerned about voting favorably on this is I have publicly stated that I'm opposed to the Olympics. I think the Olympics are going to bring huge traffic problems all around us and perhaps in Brookline if they are using your facilities, but certainly on kind of every other edge of town, and for very little benefit and lots of disruption. So I'm not I prefer to watch the Olympics on TV.
Well, I'm not, please, I hope you understand, if you take nothing else from this, we're not here to talk about the Olympics. The Olympics for us are so far off and not even in the realm of discussion around the club, because the focus right now is continuing our relationship with the town in a good light and continuing our relationship with the USGA.
What was interesting is, before town meeting is a resolution concerning the Olympics, and it's on our agenda for tonight, later in the session. So when I saw this, I'm like, how does this bear on that, if it does?
Other questions? I thought maybe I'd ask Mr. Kleckner to talk about the 7A portion of the question about convening a team to negotiate and discuss, and maybe if you'd address how you think that would, how that team would be composed, or...
Certainly. As it's been pointed out, this letter of intent it contemplates the negotiation of a definitive agreement, and that is where all the details of reimbursement of the town's cost for services, handling the way in which our facilities are used and restored, and then probably most importantly is how the town gets compensated for use of public facilities in this private event. And it would be my intent to convene a group that would consist of staff and certainly legal personnel and all of the relevant departments that would be directly involved. I would expect that Lisa Paradis would be heading the group up on my behalf, working with the Country Club and the United States Golf Association and hammering out a deal that would, of course, come back to this board for approval. I know the letter of intent contemplates that being done in October. We'll see about that. Of course, that's a good goal, but we'll have to wait to see how much progress we can make. But I would keep the board informed as we go along, and I can assure you that my interest is the town's interests, and making sure that all of our costs are covered and that the disruption would be kept to a minimum and that we would be compensated fairly for use of public facilities.
Great. Other questions from members of the board or comments? All right. Well, I'm going to move that we approve and execute the letter of intent with the United States Golf Association that's in your packet as page 7-2 through 7-4. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
I'll abstain.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And I further move that we authorize the town administrator to convene a team for the purpose of negotiating a definitive agreement, subject to Board of Selectmen approval. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
I'll abstain once
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And I hope we're able to show you, Selectman Daley.
I do too. I do too.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 8 is the Holocaust Memorial Project, and I'm going to briefly introduce this as well. I think many of you know that about 20 years ago, the town undertook a project to memorialize and take the testimony of town residents who were witnesses to the Holocaust. And as a result of that project, some 20 years ago, some videotape films and accounts were made, some 90 hours of films. Unfortunately, what was found by Mr. Jeleno was that those videotapes have been kind of sitting dormant for 20 years. They're not accessible by the public, and there's no ready way in which anybody could hear those testimonies. And so I will turn it over to Lloyd, and he will describe to you what has happened since making that discovery. I think it's a very exciting possibility.
Yes. It's really interesting. Actually, when I took over the office and started looking through the tapes and actually reviewing some of the tapes, and was really concerned, actually taken back that they were laying dormant, as you said. At the time when Steve Bressler was clearing out his office, I told him, said one of my priorities is actually to make sure that this project happens as quickly as we can get it going. Since that time, we actually, my staff and interns have actually indexed all, I don't want to use technical terms here, reviewed all the folks who were actually interviewed. We have a log of that, as well as what type of format the tapes or recordings are in. A significant portion of those tapes are actually in 3/4-inch tape, which most people can't play and unfortunately can't be used in that state. So we need to actually have them converted, which was actually part of a project that in the middle 90s was started. They went from 3/4 tape to VHS, and then some tapes are actually made into a CD, but the majority of them still need to be in a more modern format. My understanding is the reason why that's needed is because over time, the tapes do degrade, and we're going to most likely lose some if we don't do something quite quickly with it. Once that happened, we also looked at the releases, and I know a little bit of the movie business that releases are big, they should be taken to be important. And so I asked the town council to actually look at the releases as well as hire an outside person to actually look at the releases to see if they're still functional. And we found that they weren't as in the current in that state. So we're actually working aggressively to actually get those releases to a more modern and state, and taking into account the technologies and media formats that are out today. One of the other things I did was actually look for someone who can actually put this together for us in two different levels. Number one, the actual intent of the folks who started the Holocaust Witness Project was to actually have them in archival format that we could use for the public, but also looking to do sort of like a gateway documentary for those tapes. There are 90 hours worth of tape that, and only a small portion that can be actually put in the documentary, but we want people to know the stories and actually pique some interest to actually go look at them in the library. To that end, I asked Harvey to come on to oversee the project and actually do the project, and that's where we are today. So I'd actually like to bring Harvey Rodman up here to actually talk about the details of what's going on.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Hi, my name's Harvey Brovman. I'm the publisher of BrooklineHub.com and the owner of Advanced Digital Websites. I've been a video producer for longer than I care to admit, but about 25 years. First, I'd like to say it's congratulations to Betsy and to Ken for your amazing service to Brookline.
Thank you, Harry.
I would vote for you if you ran again, but I also am happy for you that you're not. I started working with Lloyd Gillenow with the Brookline Youth Awards, so something I've been doing by myself for 3 years, and Mel Kleckner asked if we could work with the town of Brookline, which we were honored to do so, and working with Lloyd's office has been a great experience. This is the second straight year we've done it, and I think that the Brookline Youth Awards, we work with interviews, and so this is a lot about interviews. So anyway, it was an honor to be asked to produce this documentary. The goal is to work with the 88 hours of interviews that were conducted by the town in the 1990s. I think they were conducted between about 1991 and 1996. Conduct new interviews with the interviewers from back then. Larry Langer, who's a professor at Simmons, conducted most of the interviews, and he's one of the world's foremost authorities on documenting the Holocaust and their stories. And also Holocaust witnesses that live in the town that weren't interviewed back then. And one of them is our Jennifer Gilbert's mom. And there are other survivors that live in Brookline that weren't interviewed back then. And there are survivors from back then that are still got other things to say that were interviewed. So also working with archival footage, we made an agreement with the Spielberg Archives, which is part of the U.S. Holocaust Museum. They are letting us use we have access to about 75% of what they have. Most of these witnesses lived in Europe. A lot of them lived in Poland. The Spielberg Archives has, they feel that they have probably footage from every shtetl in Poland, for an example, pre-World War II footage, so we could see what it was like for these people before the Holocaust. And also, Facing History in Ourselves is a great resource, and they've been really fantastic to us so far, providing advice and resources, and we're going to continue to lean on them, lean on any local resource that can help us make this better. As Lloyd says, we've been working with Brookline resident attorney Vanka Jarrett. She's an entertainment lawyer, and she's also an attorney for Coolidge Corner Theater. I happen to have known her for the last 23 years. She actually went to college with my wife. And we've also vetted vendors to, as Lloyd explained, to transfer this footage. I've been working in the media archiving industry for a long time. Transfer the footage from an analog format, tape, to a digital format, and also working with the Brookline Library to make sure that there are certain specifications that the library needs in order for them to archive it, so that we meet their specifications as well for archival purposes, and Vanka can help us, know better what we can do with that footage based on the releases, because a lot of the survivors have passed away. And then we are in the middle of working on conducting extensive research into finding the whereabouts of the people that were interviewed in the 1990s and their families, if they are not with us anymore, and so that the families can be kept apprised of what we're doing, since this is such a sensitive subject. And then from the documentary itself, we hope to teach the community what happened, the different types of survivors and the different stories. Some of the survivors survived camps, some of them survived different ways, and not all of them were Jewish, so they all have different stories, and they lived in our town. And some of them were World War II veterans that discovered these camps. And then let the public know that the full stories will exist with the town of Brookline, and that they can access those full stories. And if they want to hear the 2 and 3 hour story of an interview, which they're pretty compelling for me, this is what I do for a living, so I think they're really compelling. So that we can introduce more people to this and what happened, which it was a really great effort, what happened 25 years ago in this town, where they did document these stories. And you could imagine 90 hours is a lot of footage. Imagine conducting 90 hours of interviews. They did that for us, and it's a real gift to our community. So I'm really honored to get to be able to work with that gift. And then teach people about what their lives were like before the Holocaust, and then what their lives were like in Brookline, and then what we can learn from their stories. One of the narratives we have in BrooklineHub.com is we always go back to how can we make Brookline better tomorrow, and then what we can learn from this to make Brookline better tomorrow. That's about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Harvey. Jennifer, do you want to add anything?
Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert, I'm so pleased to be here in support of Harvey and Lloyd's efforts, and Ken, your efforts to revive this project and reconvene the committee. You know, the former committee was made up of some fantastic people. I was actually working for Brookline, and I remember when Steve Bressler got this gift and when the Holocaust Committee was convened. We've, through Town Council's office, placed a call to Regina Barshak and her son, who was on the original committee and really had the vision for this project. And my mother is a survivor and a witness, and she's worked for Facing History since its inception in the 1970s. And I remember her first beginning that journey, and even, in fact, today she was at a high school lecturing to a bunch of about 150 or so 15 and 16-year-olds about her experience during that time and what she went through. And to have these tapes digitized and made into a modern format for everybody to view, for Harvey to take on the effort to make what we're referring to as a gateway documentary for people to understand that these resources, this very, very important part of history is out there for folks to enjoy, for students, for citizens. There are a lot of residents in Brookline that have a story to tell, whether they be soldiers, survivors, or simply witnesses that went through this time period. And I just want to commend Lloyd for taking this on. Really fantastic.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Talk
And
about-
I'm a volunteer. I'm volunteering my time and my services to help this effort. So thank you.
Talk about hit the ground running for Lloyd. I think it was really extremely commendable to realize the need for this so early into your tenure as our new diversity director, department head.
Yeah, over the years, I'd heard rumors about these tapes. I'm so glad to see that they'll be actually accessible, and yeah, I think it's information that's disappearing as these people pass away, and so it's so important that you put this together. I want to thank you all for working on it.
And I just want to add, I actually do remember when the recordings were being made, and one of the things that I recall is the commitment that they become accessible, and what's of some interest and great concern is that over time, the original format is no longer accessible, really. So it's very, very important to preserve them. I don't know whether it's possible for the original tapes to have, I don't know, some kind of protection, but also to have them I don't know what the word here is, re-recorded, copied, made into facsimiles of a more long preserved, perhaps medium, because one of the other things that I keep thinking about is we have so many electronic improvements and changes that the CD version or the DVD version or whatever it is can become obsolete. I don't know how you deal with that. But I will say that the idea of having them publicly accessible was always the intention. And it's very important, I think, to continue this, to complete it. And even if I understood correctly, is this documentary that you're putting together something that would perhaps be something that can be in a form that can be, how am I saying this, publicly shown either through Access TV or
Maybe even.
on some other place?
Maybe even on a bigger
Big screen,
stage, actually.
yeah, Coolidge Corner Theater or whatever, I don't know.
Selectman DeWitt, this is what needs to be worked out, and this is why we need to reconvene and reappoint
Absolutely.
members to the Memorial
Absolutely.
Committee, so we can figure out exactly how that could be done. But yes, the vision that you're seeing before you here with Harvey and Lloyd, and I should add that Library Director Sarah Slyman
great.
and is involved too, and
Good.
as well as Deputy Town Council Patty Correa also. That's the vision here. If we can work out the details of it, and the licensing, and the releases, and the fundraising, because this would be done with private fundraising as
course.
well. The vision that they have is for something that would be on a bigger screen than
That would be great.
than what you've just imagined. So, Selectman Franco?
So it sounds to me as though we're looking for some particular expertise on this committee, maybe with fundraising and with sort of approaching vendors to help with get this film onto a larger scale. So is that sort of the vision of this committee, or am I misreading the tea leaves here?
No, I think you're right, and I mean, if you if you adopt the second part of the second question on the agenda tonight, I think the Board of Selectmen will need to, reconvene a committee, because I think what you've heard is very few of the members from the old committee are still around, and, advertise and put together a list of which expertises are necessary to make this most feasible.
The reason I ask is both because this is free advertising for people to get on the committee, but also because we seem to have such capable and competent people already involved in the project. So
Right.
I'm wondering who else we need to make this a success.
I think there's some ideas about that already, but it's probably too soon to start publicly talking about them. Selectman Waschinsky?
Yeah, I'm blown away. I can just say, wow. This sounds like a great project, and I'm glad that the tape's going to be preserved and made more available, and it's, wow.
Great. So without further ado, I'm going to move any questions about the charge, rather than read it out loud
No.
again? But, so this is as you've heard, they're technically on the books of the town. We have a Brookline Holocaust Memorial Committee. It's been, effectively defunct now for many years, and we've drafted a proposed new charge for it that includes the documentary film aspects of this. And so unless there's questions about the charge, I'm going to move that we adopt the renewed charge, which is page 8.1 in your packets, to the Brookline Holocaust Memorial Committee. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And I further move that we direct the Brookline Holocaust direct that the Brookline Holocaust Memorial Committee be reconvened and that new appointments be made. And I'll leave that to you in the coming weeks to make those appointments and figure out how to do that. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley.
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt.
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky.
Aye.
Selectman Franco.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you. We're on our way.
This might be a good retirement job for one of our departing
possible.
members.
Yeah,
If my arm were properly twisted.
that's what I was thinking, too. So.
We're on to agenda item 9, which Mr. Martineau will talk to us about for the second time this evening. He will present to us Economic Development Planner Andy Martineau to update us on the wayfinding sign project. Andy.
Thank you. Just queuing things up here. Good evening. Hello again. Thank you for having me. I'm here tonight to give you a preview of the wayfinding task force work to date and a preview of the preferred design at the moment that we'll be taking to the Transportation Board next month. If you recall, I appeared before the board last fall for a contract approval to work with Mark Favorman from Favorman Design, who's here with me tonight. Mark's been helping shepherd us through the design process. Just very briefly, the project really, popped out.
I need to direct it to the projector.
So it definitely worked before the meeting.
Maybe you ought to be more specific in your suggestions, Neil.
Sorry about that.
There we go. Don't touch anything.
Okay. So where was I? So I appeared before the board for contract approval last fall for Mark Favorman Designs, and Mark's been helping shepherd us through the project. Just very briefly, the project had 3 goals, really. Unlike a lot of the communities that Mark and similar consultants work in that have no wayfinding, Brookline actually has a lot of wayfinding, and that's sort of part of the problem. A lot of our signs for our cultural destinations are in a state of disrepair. There's a real lack of cohesiveness. They come in all different shapes and sizes, colors, fonts, etc. And part of the reason for that is we don't have the same level of design standards that we do for other signs in town. So think a cultural facade, business facade sign or window sign. And so over the years, we've amassed this collection of signs that really isn't doing us any good in terms of directing people to the places that we want them to get to, our commercial districts, our cultural anchors, parks, etc. And through the work with Mark and the task force, we're hoping to create those standards and as early as this summer start moving forward with some preliminary sign replacement and perhaps some new signs. And in doing so, we wanted to come up with a design that above all was functional. Betsy, I remember you when I came for this project, you said if you do anything, make sure that the information is legible and serves a purpose in that regard. But we also want to do it in a way that's visually appealing, and the signs, we want them to be adaptable over time. We don't want to recreate the problem that we already have. So why signs? This is something that a few folks have asked as I've taken this show on the road. This is a commercial areas beautification project. We're using ED Streetscape CIP funds to support it. And one of the ways that signs can do that is by providing a unifying element that largely we don't have in our commercial districts at the moment. They also provide comfort and improve customer experience by providing consistent visual cues and also signaling your arrival when you've gotten there. A lot of folks these days use a smartphone, but the sign still tells you that you've gotten to your destination. And we're also celebrating our cultural resources. Brookline, I think, is very lucky. I think as of last week, we have three National Historic Sites. We have some wonderful specialty museums like the large Anderson Auto Museum, the Longyear Museum. We also have some really great parks. in town that bring people to Brookline. And so it's about celebrating those things. Just to give you a flavor of what I mean by when I talk about cultural wayfinding signs and destination wayfinding signs and sort of the collection that we've amassed over the years. If you can read them. This is a crowd favorite. This is the intersection of Lee and Clyde Street, where seemingly every institution in South Brookline has mounted a sign, including the Auto Museum, which in the middle there, that's one of 3 iterations of different signs that they have around town directing people to their location. And so, in starting out, the task force trying to come up with an overarching theme to help guide the design going forward, really latched on to trees and greenery, Frederick Law Olmsted's work here in Brookline and also other places that continue to influence a lot of how the town appears today. And then also architectural cues. Brookline has a lot of rich architecture, and the task force really wanted to find ways to integrate as many of those things as we could into the design. And so that led to a few different theme directions. Again, the Olmsted reference, tree-lined landscape, leaves, that sort of thing. It's moving on its own. Started looking at colors. The task force from the outset wanted to get away from the municipal blues and greens that we tend to gravitate towards here in town government, and also just about every other sign in Massachusetts is green. And where we landed is on a deeper red mark. I hope this resolution does it justice.
Not bad.
A deeper red, not quite burgundy, as the primary base color, and then a sort of medium orange as an accent color. We started looking at sign families, different shapes is what I mean by sign families. Another issue that the task force wanted to deal with at the outset is, to the extent possible, being an old Massachusetts town, we wanted to get away from being ye old New England in the field like we tend to do with a lot of different things we do aesthetically in New England towns. The other reason that we like this sign family is it provides a lot of different flexibility with sign placement. There's a solution pretty much for any type of location that you would want wayfinding in town included in this family. Getting back to the theme, we looked at several different leaf options, and the feeling was that the elm leaf, something with a little bit more definition to it. We'd previously looked at a couple of elm leaf options that were a little more abstract in appearance, and you didn't quite get the leaf motif. Here you see it applied, and then we start to apply it to the sign family. Sorry, it just keeps moving. And then we started looking in fonts, and this is another means in which you could sort of differentiate a ye old New England sign in terms of aesthetic and feel, and move to something that tries to get away from that. The font on the left, copperplate bold, the task force liked because it's very similar to the cast iron aluminum signs that you see around town for our streets and roads. There's no lowercase option, so it's all uppercase, just like the cast aluminum. And then the task force wanted to have a secondary font for the destination that would ultimately be in subtext on the sign. And so then you start to see it all come together. Another note on the copperplate bold font, another marriage with the cast iron signs. The B in Brookline is slightly enlarged. That's similar to how we do it with the cast iron signs as well. The first letter in the street name is often just a titch bigger, so it's sort of a nod to that. Gateway sign options, directional sign options, and then just to give you a sense of what it might start to look like once we roll out the program, some photo simulations. Sorry. And you remember the intersection of Lee and Clyde Street. There's a couple of options to choose from. Mark actually designed the farmer's market sign way back when. It's due for an update, so we're going to have that included in the early sign replacement program, and that'll be great. Finally, there's some other consolidation opportunities that we're looking into. A lot of the fraternal organizations in town have a lot of signage. A lot of it's not looking so great these days. I've seen similar solutions done in other communities. And so that's something that we're looking into as well. And finally, the end goal of this is we'll have what we're calling a kit of parts. And so as the town looks to roll out additional signage in subsequent years, or if another entity or institution comes in and says, well, hey, I could really use a wayfinding sign here to help my customers or patrons or what have you find me, we'll have those design standards, colors, specs, fonts, dimensions, all of that readily available so we can refer to it and also refer folks who come into Public Works for signage to it as well. So in terms of proposed phasing and next steps, we have some funds left in the budget for some early sign replacement as early as this summer. The task force has chosen to prioritize our business districts and having sort of gateway signs for each of the districts, and then also directional signs for our primary destinations and anchor parks. And that's something that I've been working on with Parks and Open Space, Recreation, and also the library to get a better sense of what it is they have for wayfinding needs for their clientele. And we'll be moving forward with replacing the glaring problem signs and hopefully consolidating some of the clutter this summer, including entry and gateway signs at the town borders where possible. And then phase 2 would be additional directional signs for secondary destinations. It wants me to end faster. Smaller parks, maps, apps, and wraps, which some of our commercial areas are already starting to look into creating district maps, which we would gladly print in-house and install in the kiosks that we have existing. So no cost there. And that's it.
Sorry.
I think that's very exciting.
Yeah. Is the idea that these are going to, I assume metal signs, and I'm thinking like the street sign, not the cast aluminum ones, but the
Nope.
current, I guess I'm going to call them DPW signs.
They'll be designed to state, federal, and local standards
Right.
in terms of material choice, and we're making sure that it's a durable material. Mark, what's the exact, do you remember? It's a metal.
It's generally made out of aluminum.
Yeah, right.
And then the thickness of the weather resistant. And
Right.
we made it in such a way that they would have a 10 to 20 life expectancy.
Right, painted metal, not raised letters, flat.
No.
Yeah.
And just a quick note on the copper plate signs, those are not on the docket for any type of replacement anytime soon. I think my colleagues in preservation and likely many others would be waiting for me in the parking lot if I could replace those. So.
Second daily.
Yeah, well, there's a, from my point of view, a glaring omission. I'm a co-chair of Brookline as an age-friendly community. And one thing I've been chatting with Mr. Kleckner about for quite a while, but somehow it seems to slip to the bottom of the agenda, is that we wanted an age-friendly community on those entrance signs to the community.
Like as the logo, like.
Like a logo at the bottom.
Gotcha.
And so,
I'm going to actually go back to where you started with my comment earlier, and I'm a little fearful that some of the, I hope I'm misunderstanding some of the illustrations, because if the content on the sign is so detailed and complex, the letters will reduce down to illegibility. And therefore, it's kind of important to be careful about how much you wish for. Okay? Because if you can't read it, it's of no value particularly.
that's true, we want it to be legible. We
Yeah.
want it on there and we want it legible. Can you go back to some of those signs with the two colors? There we go, okay. So are they all going to have the white lettering?
Yes.
Okay, because I was wondering, I see, oh no, he's left again. No, Mr. Rosenthal's in the back of the room. Can you come up for a minute? I want to ask you a question. Because Mr. Rosenthal has frequently reminded me that he's colorblind. So I want you to look at this sign, and you can,
You gotta ask me what color it is?
no, just tell me if you can read the words on it.
Oh, yeah, that's easy.
Okay.
The white is white on some color.
Yeah.
What about, do
Okay.
you see?
It doesn't matter what color it is, it doesn't matter.
Do you see a graphic design at the top of the square?
Right, I do, and again, I have trouble telling you if it's orange or
Can
yellow.
you tell what it
or
depicts?
possibly green.
Can
What's
you,
that?
can you tell what it depicts?
Leaves?
Good.
Good.
There you go, okay.
Excellent. You're excused.
Pass the test.
If I do so well on my,
So again, this is 95% design. We'll be taking it to the Transportation Board next month, and we're still making some final tweaks with the help of the task force and Mark, making sure that we want to do bold and address the functionality.
I guess,
issues above
actually,
all.
the only comment that I would make about what I see there is that I think you could probably read the line that says Brookline, but I'm betting that the St. Mary's line would be very hard for somebody in motion to pick up unless it's either a bolder, stronger type, that's all.
And I chose not to get into the strategy tonight because of time constraints, but that's something that we're looking into as well, different, multimodal users and placement.
How does it work? I noticed you had like a little mock-up of like a redesigned Museum of Transportation sign, but, on the one hand, you're showing us this very standardized fonts and directions, but it seems there's also a room for, the institution's own logo and font designs. How does that work? When can you use your own fonts and designs, and when do we use the town's standardized version?
Sure, yeah, Mark might have a more concise answer than me.
Thank you. The idea of wayfinding is to add comfort to the community. It's generally for first-time visitors or second-time visitors, and for delivery people, and for the in-laws and relatives that you don't want to see too often. Just find you.
Yeah.
And I'm being very, very sort of funny with that comment. But the idea is that the simpler, the better. And if you are inconsistent, it's harder to read and harder to remember. By the way, 30% of all men are colorblind, but the women, you are the ones who give it to us. That situation. So I'm glad that it's...
I'm going to take the blame for that.
Anyway, the idea is that at each institution, they can identify themselves any way they want to, but to get to that institution, to give orientation to the institution, it'll be as simple and direct and clean and consistent. So we're not, the Auto Museum needs to figure out what their logo is and to stick with it, I think. They've had several over the years, as other institutions around town. We are also, I think, trying to work with the National Park Service so we can include their symbol in a subtle way as well.
So you're going to incorporate them in, but they'll be incorporated in the context of our standardized design.
And the idea is that by doing the standards, it can be implemented, the program can be implemented over many fiscal years. So it all doesn't have to be paid for at once to have it happen.
One more question for me. How easy will it be to change these signs? Because even our most esteemed and long-lived institutions do change from time to time, and names change and
Relatively easy.
and uses change. Okay, I want to make sure it's something we can change the sign, change the information on the sign without changing the whole infrastructure.
This can be dealt with rather easy.
Good. Selectman Franco.
So I won't quibble with the design, but I'll say that I think placement of these types of signs is very important. One of the things that's going on at the state level, which I think we've all read about in the paper, is an attempt to fix the MBTA. And a portion of what the governor has proposed is boosting the advertising revenue for the T. So I expect that we're going to see some more advertisements there. I'm not entirely sure how that relates to this, but I will connect it by saying I think we're going to see more signs around our T-stops, and want to be respectful of the fact that we're not fixing our own problems and not being cognizant of what the MBTA and some of our state partners might be doing. I will say that I think option E in sort of the menu of types of signs, which is sort of the larger billboard type sign, for lack of a better way to describe it, I've got some real concerns about, especially as it relates to sightlines around some of our roads, and quite frankly, just taking up real estate on our sidewalks. So want to make sure that we're very careful in where we put signs and how they're deployed around the community.
Selectman Waschinsky.
So is the plan to, like, you showed the, what, Clyde and Lee with the myriad signs, so is the goal to, like, intersection by intersection, start cleaning that up? And then, some of these are private institutions. Would we be asking for contributions for wayfaring to some of them, or how's that going to work?
Public-private, working together is a good goal.
Yeah.
How to do it might be harder
Yeah.
than saying it, but
The way the project was conceived was that we have some funds to replace the glaring problem signs, and then over time, as we roll out the program, as institutions come and go, although hopefully some of them don't, or as they find a wayfinding need, is that there'd be a partnership to help finance it.
Okay. Any other questions? There's no vote on this tonight. I'm pleased with the progress, and I look forward to seeing this go even further.
Thank you.
thank you.
I'm sorry we're running quite behind schedule here, about an hour, but we're on to agenda item 10, which is a grant of locations. So we're convening a public hearing on the petition of Comcast for permission to construct and a location for such a line of conduits and manholes with the necessary cables therein under the following public way. Holly Lane, from the intersection of Heath Street, a distance of 213 feet to a handhole. And Mr. Ditto, would you tell us about this, please?
Yes, the representative from Comcast is among the missing, but I will say this is a pretty straightforward grant of location, and it does have a significant benefit with it. This is actually for 213 feet coming in from Heath Street down Holly Lane. And once this conduit is in and cable's pulled, we're actually going to remove a pole at the intersection of Sheaf and Holly and take down the wires that that's supporting. So there is a little bit of benefit, and I strongly support it.
Mr. Ditto, is this being done right now? I noticed Heath Street was closed today, right around that location.
It shouldn't have been.
So what's going on there right now?
I don't know.
Okay.
You got me.
Questions for Mr. Ditto?
Well, I actually, it's got to do with timing. It seems to me this is a beneficial thing to do, and I have no objection to it. But it seems also that this appears to be proposed to be occurring at about the same time as the National Grid proposal, and they are within very short distance of one another, and I'm worrying about the combined impact of the two, and wondered if it can be organized in such a way, since the Comcast said it would only be for 2 days, can that one get finished before the National Grid one starts, in order not to have both of them at the same time?
Yeah, I don't know how quickly these people can ramp up, but I know Grid's here tonight to give us a presentation and request for a waiver of the bylaw.
Yeah.
Noise bylaw. So maybe I can work with the two of them to make sure that there's no
I
conflict.
suppose the good news, if Comcast has already started their project out their grant location, they'll be done all the sooner.
Right. But Comcast did actually suggest it would be the first week in May, and that it would take 2 days, and so I figured next week.
Yeah.
And it's, the National Grid, at least in the documentation we received, says the second week of May, so it seemed to me that you would really want Comcast to be done before National Grid started, that's all.
Right.
All right.
Well, it looks like that's happening.
This is a public hearing. Anyone here to be heard or care to be heard on this petition for a location? Holly Lane and Heath Street? No? Further questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, I'm going to move that we grant permission for Comcast to construct and a location for a line of conduits and manholes with necessary cables therein under the following public way: Holly Lane, a conduit running northerly from pole number 53 at the intersection with Heath Street for a distance of approximately 213 feet to a new handhole. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ditto. Next is agenda item 11, which is a request for a noise bylaw waiver, and it's also a public hearing. It's the request of National Grid for a noise bylaw waiver in connection with work done not far from there at 1164 Boylston Street, 1140 Boylston Street, 1039 Boylston Street, and this will be for 2 weeks commencing in May, I'm sorry, for beginning the second week of May and continuing for approximately 2.5 months. So that's quite a substantial period of
Right.
time. I want to hear about it
Sure.
and why we need such a long period of time.
Victor Santana, National Grid Community Relations, Business Office over at 40 Sylvan Road in Waltham, Massachusetts. We are here before you today to respectfully request a temporary waiver of the noise bylaw, noise control bylaw, so that we can perform integrity and maintenance work on our gas main and Route 9, specifically between Jefferson Road and Hammond Street. The scope of our work is specific to Route 9, Boylston Street. We gave you those intersections just as reference points. We'll be doing some excavation, but everything's gonna be on Route 9. The main driver as to why we're requesting this waiver is because, as you know, Route 9, it's under the jurisdiction of Mass DOT, and they only granted us a night permit to do the work. Although we anticipate the work to last 2.5 months, most of the work should have very little impact or no impact to the abutters and residents of the area. We will need the bylaw, I'm sorry, my apologies, the waiver for the specific entry and exit pits at those intersections that you mentioned a few minutes before, so that the technicians can go into the gas main and do the maintenance work that they need to perform. I have the project supervisor with me here, Brian Griffith, and he can get into the technical aspect of the work.
Yeah, I'd like to hear particularly about the impacts. I imagine it's not just noise, but you probably have some bright lights going all night too, so.
And I'd be interested in knowing the hours.
Ryan Griffiths, I'm the construction supervisor that will be overseeing this project. The hours that we have from the state on the permit are 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. There will be lights set up. We are talking about the 3 locations. 2 endpoints will be slightly larger, approximately 25 by 10 or so openings. And then those will be on the westbound, going out of Boston, side of Boylston Street. The one in the middle, we're hoping to keep that contained to the island. Our main crosses and then goes back, so we're hoping, and we know that it does cross there, that we have some a drip box to know that the main is actually located there. So the intent is to keep that middle one contained to the island, although for safe work, someone probably will have to set up on one lane in either direction while they're doing the work. But as for what's going on with lights, there will be lights set up overnight. What we did last year with a similar type of project in Washington Street was to keep the noise down and make it, manageable for actual people asleep out there. We limited what we're considering loud noise, like jackhammering, to 11 p.m., prior to 11 p.m. And that's something that we can complete our work with. So if they go out there, first thing they would do, if they're starting a new excavation, they jackhammer those dimensions, and then from there they can just use their backhoe to complete the construction for that night. And then they won't be hearing jackhammers all night long. One of the complaints we did hear last year was with a vac truck, and that's something that we don't intend to use. It's something that only comes up if we run across multiple utilities and it becomes a safety type issue where we can't excavate. The project last year, as you may recall, was right down the street from here over in Washington Street, across the tracks heading towards the Boston line. That was a more congested area. We're more optimistic about what we will find here for space for our excavations. We never know exactly what we'll find, but what we see on paper and with our records indicates this will be a job that does go more smoothly. There's a limited number of openings compared to what we had on the other one. There's no services coming off of it. It's simply the 3 excavations. Then we stop the gas flow and begin the work that would repair existing leaks or potential future leaks. And as you know, I think this past winter, I just drove the road today, I think I went over 4 patches and leaks that we had done. So it is a road that has had a significant history of leaks. So it seems like it is beneficial to both National Grid and the town to take care of this section of the roadway.
Okay.
Just, if I can just footnote what I was saying earlier, the other thing that people go absolutely nuts over is backing up trucks going beep, 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 beep at 2 a.m.
It is something
That's
hard to say.
federal regulation. I mean, it's hard for
Yeah,
them to
we're not
avoid
going to
it.
turn them off.
But you could try
Typically-
not to back up
Right, no,
at 2 a.m.
It's policy, we actually have it within, not for the reason of noise, but for safe driving procedures. When they park, they're supposed to, be set to go straight out. You're not supposed to be backing over significant distances. So it is a thought process as they pull up to a job site that they won't be backing excessively. That's one of our policies that's built in for our contractors and our own employees.
Wasn't there a project where the contractor actually had a different beeping mechanism
they
that
managed
wasn't
to
quite
do
so
something. I
piercing?
can't
The
remember
Boston
what it was.
University Bridge project in Cambridge, that
Yeah.
rotary where
Right.
Memorial Drive sort of does the flyover.
Yeah.
They, I think, were required to do some sort of lighting, strobe lighting when a truck
Yeah,
was
right,
backing up.
they used lights instead of sound, right, right.
I remember something we did where it was a less intrusive noise, something that was audible but not as piercing as
I think it was at the red cab site they were telling us,
I think so,
though I
too.
don't know how successful or whether they did it.
Be interesting to find out.
Well, I mean, I think if we have the danger here of gas leaks,
Yep.
we have to allow this to move forward.
Can we put as a condition no jackhammering after 11?
We can do that.
If I may, that's a condition that you guys offered when we did the job on Washington Street, which we gladly accepted. And we'll be open to any sort of conditions or considerations that you may feel appropriate for this particular project.
Okay. So I think we could probably come up with some on the fly here. Selectman Franco?
Yeah, I know that the Washington Street project was approved prior to my election to this board, but I certainly heard of complaints about it, and I respect the fact that no two job sites are the same, and that you may not have to use the same type of equipment, but I'll note that residences, I think, are closer in the case of this project than they were with Washington Street.
Yeah, in an odd way, there's a section that's more commercial, and then there's another section that's more residential. So, have you already notified abutters? Do you have a plan for notifying abutters?
So we did a pre-notification, letting the abutters know that we're going to be having this hearing before you, requesting the notify, but once we have the actual time frame, the schedule of work, we can notify the abutters, letting them know that the work is about to commence.
Right, and as I understand from the description, I hope I got this right, there will be some shorter periods of noise and longer periods when there'll be less noise, is that right?
Yeah, so once we get past the excavation of the entry and exit pits, basically the noise will be subject to an air compressor.
Yeah.
For the technicians.
So I think in communication with the abutters, it's really important for them to know which nights their children can't sleep and things like that, that maybe they can take some steps. I don't know whether it's earplugs or what, but it's very helpful to people to have some way of preparing for this and mitigating it.
Yeah, and to that point, actually, I wanted to raise the point that there's, as Brian mentioned, there's a part of the project that we're going to be off the roadway, and we intend to go back to Mass DOT to see if for that a particular phase of the project, we can do some work during the day, just to kind of mitigate the inconvenience and the frustration.
No, then the traffic will be horrible. I don't know whether there's anything good with it.
Actually, the island, it's...
Oh, the island, yeah, maybe,
We
yeah,
walked the area
right.
a couple of weeks ago,
Right.
and we felt that it was big enough that perhaps we can exercise that.
Yeah, well, that would be great if you can.
And if I may, to your point, the project on Washington Street, that was considerably larger and a little bit more complex in terms of scope. We would actively address any sort of issues. I remember specifically 2 complaints that came out of that project. One was specific to the vacuum truck. The other one was raised through the town manager's office. And we quickly and swiftly addressed those. So we'll be looking to do more of that if they were to come up.
This is a public hearing. Anybody care to be heard on this matter, either for it or against it? Again, we're talking about agenda item number 11, which is a noise bylaw waiver. Ms. Farley?
Hi, I'm Regina Frawley, Precinct 16. Just a suggestion, Janice Kahn is the head of the Chestnut Hill Village Neighborhood Association, and it's the kind of thing she ought to have a heads up on, because she does keep a darn good eye on the whole intersection of Hammond and Hamilton Parkway. So may I please respectfully request that she be notified and, if need be, consulted?
Okay.
She's on the first floor right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to be heard on this matter? All right, anything further from the Board of Selectmen?
I'll ask, it sounds like really the noise bylaw waiver is required for sort of the beginning phase and the end phase. And during the middle, it's simply going to be an air compressor that's run. So I guess my question for National Grid is, do you need the noise bylaw waiver for the air compressor sort of middle phase, or is it really the two bookend phases that are going to be the loud and intrusive parts?
We will need it throughout because we're going to have those openings open for our employees to access. It's just about... Yeah, the maps are a little bit probably overwhelming if you're not familiar with our designs, but they do call out the areas where the excavations will be going on. There's call-outs on there, which might have some small text and be a little difficult to read, but it indicates the locations. But as for whether it would be a middle part where we would not need to be out there at nights, the problem is that we're going to be having these plated openings, we need to get access to them, and it's going to be just the fact that we're opening them and causing the issues with the traffic. That's why the state wants us to be out there at night. So I don't foresee us being able to go out there and do that middle part during the daytime. That's when we'll actually be going in and sealing the main.
Right, so I hear that you need to be out there at night. My question is, you're now, on top of asking for the permission to do the night work, asking for a waiver of a local ordinance that governs the volume of noise. So I'm really asking, do you need that noise waiver in the middle of the project, or is it really just to open up and do the excavation at the beginning and then to close things up at the end of the project?
If we're talking strictly noise, it would be the beginning part of the project where we're doing the excavations.
But because they're actually doing the work for that period of time, even though it's not the loud work, they still have to work, because can't shut down Route 9 during the day, evidently. At least not for this purpose. I mean, they've shut down Route 9 plenty to build the shopping developments in Newton for various purposes.
Again, I'm not disagreeing that the work needs to happen at night. My question is, it sounds like the noisy part, the part that's going to violate the noise bylaw, is the beginning excavation.
Well, I think it all violates the noise bylaw.
At night, there's much stricter standards.
Okay.
No matter what they're doing, they're violating it. Well, I do intend to propose some conditions if this is going to be approved, so I've got no jackhammering after 11 PM, and reasonable efforts will be made to minimize the frequency and intrusiveness of backup signals on trucks.
Thank you.
Anything else? Toying with the idea of having our building department have some the consultation with the building department for any changes in work plan or something like that, or, I don't know. just,
Well,
Building or
it wouldn't, it'd be
engineering?
Mr. Ditto, it wouldn't be the building department.
Oh, that's, well, I'm sure they have a building permit right here too, right?
No, I don't think so.
Street opening
Street
permit.
opening for DPW.
It's
But
DPW.
the work that's being done doesn't have a
No
permit?
structures.
Mr. Ditto, is there anything else you'd propose as a condition for this?
No, I think you touched all bases.
I would just say ample notice and,
Yeah, right, and communication with abutters.
Yeah, although, that's right. Communication with abutters on work schedule.
And you don't see any of the abutters here, but let me assure you that when you start jackhammering,
You're
you'll
gonna
hear
hear
from
from
them.
I have heard from I received about 3 calls regarding the project, and I was able to brief
Okay.
on the
Good.
specifics, so.
I'm going to say communication with abutters and Engineering Department. Okay. All right, I'm going to move that we grant a noise bylaw waiver in connection with work to be done at 1164 Boylston Street at the Hammond Street intersection, 1140 Boylston Street at the Dunster Road intersection, and 1039 Boylston Street at the Jefferson Road intersection, commencing the second week of May and continuing for approximately 2.5 months to National Grid upon the following conditions: no jackhammering after 11 p.m., that reasonable efforts be made to minimize the frequency and intrusiveness of truck backup signals, and that communications with the abutters and the engineering department be maintained on work schedule, and any changes in the noise or visual impacts of this project. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you.
Can I just ask before you go, I'm not sure where Jefferson is,
Oh.
and I'm wondering if that's in Newton, actually.
No, it's
Is it
in Brookline.
Okay.
It's, you
Okay.
don't know the name of it, because I think it sort of visually looks like it's part of another street.
Okay,
But
It's
it
across
is-
from Dunster, I think.
okay. All right, I was just going to suggest maybe
It's
they
just from
needed...
the south.
Or it might be a little,
Okay, I've got it.
It's shorter than Short Street, in terms of short streets in Brookline. Thank you. We're on to, by the way, the open air license, agenda item 12 has been moved to agenda item 15, so we'll be taking that up at the end of the meeting tonight. We're on to agenda item 13, which is further review and votes on warrant articles. The first one for consideration is Article 12, the sidewalk snow bylaw. And I think we've seen some proposed revisions to that. Is there somebody who
Yeah,
can tell
well,
us
I
about
can
it?
only say that I included in your packet a communication from Mr. Spiegel of the advisory committee, who was working with Dennis Doty, also of the advisory committee and of the my task force, and there is a proposed substitute motion. I'm not sure if Mr. Rosenthal is in favor of that, but I think at this point, it's probably a good compromise and one that will generate support for a very complicated set of changes to the bylaw.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Actually, happen to see them together. I didn't come for that reason. As you know, I have another article, but I do think this is a good way to proceed at this point. As you all know, if you've tried to even skim any of my lengthy missives, I've had concerns about the proposal in the first place, and I gather that some others have agreed that it could use some refinements and to go. I've seen Stanley's proposal, which I think is the way to go as an interim device, because I always felt that that was the key step, is doing the most important thing and then look at the rest of it later. So if called upon, I'd be willing to help consult with anybody on that in the future to try to do the rest of it maybe for the next town meeting.
so is the proposal before us the Spiegel motion?
Yes.
So all that does is it changes the penalties.
Right.
Well, I think I thought there was a little bit more to that, but there was a change in 7.75 and also some language in 7.76, which gives the commissioners some discretion to
My thing doesn't have
delay,
a-
to delay compliance if, for example, there was a state ban on travel or some other extenuating circumstance. And this also addresses the intent to have any of that notice, and all notices, quite frankly, as you know, we've been doing that this past winter, is to use the internet's homepage and possibly definitely social media and the emergency telephone notification system. So that's all now codified, and would be codified in that bylaw, which I think is very important.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea that it's up to the commissioner to delay the periods. I think that's a good approach to the flexibility that we will looking for, so. So I don't have any problem with the Spiegel amendment myself. I think it sounds like the way to go.
Does this, I don't know whether this, I thought you had a problem with when people want to challenge a fine that they've been granted.
Well, I think that's being held in abeyance.
Oh, so
May I ask,
it's not even in.
may I have
Yeah.
to see a packet to see what's before you? Is that,
I think that's being held in abeyance, is my understanding.
Correct.
Because there was a question I've raised about the
Yes.
difference between the Department of Field versus the non-criminal, and what do you tell people, how do they challenge, and so forth. I think that's being held to look at later.
Yeah, my understanding is that that would be brought back with whatever corrections or appropriate language.
Which I think finally, the advisory committee agreed there were some issues, and Stanley was one of them, so. I wasn't here for this, but I would urge that this be done as an interim thing, and that the whole thing come back later, as was done on the disorderly disturbing the peace bylaw a couple of years ago, so.
Okay.
So has the advisory committee voted this, or is it?
I don't know if they voted it.
He indicated that the AC will be considering the motion, whether that's tonight or Thursday, I don't know. I can consult with Melissa, who's downstairs.
I think tonight they're doing school budget, so I doubt that they'd be
Thursday
doing
night.
much else.
Well, I would encourage us to vote it, and if they haven't, we can be the leaders on this.
So
It seems like a good approach.
I'm going to move for the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on warrant Article 12 as amended by the language proposed by Stanley Spiegel in his email dated April 27, 2015, April 27, 2015 at 1:57 PM, which amends sections 7.7.5 and 7.7.6 of the article, of the bylaw, yeah. Thank you. Any question, comment? All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
I'll also vote aye. Moving on to warrant Article 19 on the Olympics. Do we have any representative of the, arguing in favor of the Boston Olympics here? I mean, that was our goal. That's why we didn't vote this last week, and I know that there's been some discussion, but we still don't have anybody. Well, I don't want to hold this any further. I don't think we need to hear the arguments again, but from my point of view, without hearing the rest of it, I'm going to reserve my vote until town meeting. I'm just going to abstain for the time being, but I know Selectman Daley feels strongly about this, and so...
I'll move favorable action on the warrant article.
Why don't you make your motion?
Yeah.
All right, all in favor of favorable action, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain. Thank you. We'll move on to warrant article number 8, which is the big one, fiscal year 2016 budget.
I'm going to,
Mr.
I
Clerk?
think that,
Council
that we should, I'm going to move to substitute for the advisory committee's recommendations, the town administrator's proposed budget.
Good. Well, I wanted to hear from the town administrator first.
On his proposed budget.
Proposed budget, right. But, well, we know his proposed budget, that's for sure, because that's what we've been studying here for the last 3 months. But I'd like the town administrator to bring us up to date on recent developments on his proposed budget, and I'd like to give the board an opportunity to suggest any revisions or amendments to that proposed budget before we put it to a vote.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. So really, what we have this year, because of the override election, are 2 budgets. And my budget proposal, along with I believe the school department's, includes a so-called no override budget, which conforms to the town's revenue limitations without an override, and then a conditional budget that if the override passed. What I think we've been focusing on is the so-called no override budget, which I had suggested and incorporated in my budget proposal back in February, that, excuse me, that because of the extraordinary impacts of school enrollment on the school system and the deferred ability to deal with that enrollment, that the town should, the municipal department should contribute in some way. And so at some point, Sean Cronin, former deputy town administrator, and I developed a proposal that would basically split the cost of the really essential needs to open school next year with a significant increase in enrollment, as has been documented in the override study committee process and other. And that included $682,000. That was the number that I felt, based on a formula that we worked up, would be an appropriate diversion or reallocation of funds that were otherwise called for in the school-town partnership formula to be given to the schools based on enrollment impacts. And those $682,000 of cuts, which are incorporated in my memo and in the financial plan, I would admit are controversial, as I think any cuts would be. And as I reported to you, I had quite a active conversation with the advisory committee the other evening about that, because the advisory committee clearly has not embraced this idea that the town would vary from the school-town partnership formula and reallocate funds if the override didn't pass. In fact, the advisory committee has consistently voted so far during their deliberations on this budget to add back funding. And I believe there are, at this point, there's over $500,000 of funding that the override, the advisory committee has added back that really isn't funded anywhere yet. And I know that they're continuing to work on that up until Thursday evening. But at this point in time, we are preparing to send out the combined reports. And I think it would be prudent for the Board of Selectmen to incorporate in their combined reports their vote on a budget proposal. So I have made one change, and that relates to the cut in the mental health budget, which I think has received some of the most controversial comments about that. Let me just say a little bit about the basis of that identification of that reduction. Well, first of all, the $682,000, I don't believe it's appropriate to have an across-the-board cut across all departments, but I did feel it was important to have a balanced schedule of reductions that incorporated really representative of the town's budget, which is personnel. It's heavy on personnel because that's where most of our money is. Some expenses, including annual capital expenditures, and some programs and services. I intentionally identified some services that we've been talking about for a long time whenever we talk about proposed cutbacks, and in case of this year, the Override Study Committee identified a whole series of municipal programs and services that they thought needed to take another look at. And so that's one of the reasons included was the mental health contract. I cut 25% of that contract initially. I can make a recommendation at this point to bring it down to about a $15,000 cut. I think that's about a 10% cut. This is a service that has not really been looked at for, I'm going to say, 20 or more years. I think is very important, but to suggest we couldn't cut 10%, I think is premature. But having said that, I understand it is a controversial cut. If the board was interested in looking at alternatives, I'm certainly open to that. But at this point, I have been able to reduce that cut down to about $15,000, representing about 10% of that program. I have included a spreadsheet that identifies both the no override and the conditional override budget. You see how it varies from with the advisory subcommittee and the full committee. And again, I'm not sure how the committee is going to, or whether they will, try to balance that before the override election next Tuesday. But if they don't, they'll have to figure out how to communicate that in the supplemental combined reports. Melissa, I don't know if you've had any last-minute updates. I know you've been down to the advisory committee this evening, or anything else you wanted to add with respect to this budget vote.
Sure. So the advisory committee is currently discussing the school department budget. So I think that's the last budget that they've taken up before they try to come into balance. So what you have in front of you is a balanced vote, both with an override and without an override. The only thing that has changed from what we originally submitted as part of the financial plan is that the adjustment that Mel talked about for the mental health contract, an increase in state aid based on the governor's House 1 budget, which pretty much covers the group health rate increase that we saw at the GIC. So those are really the only changes from what was originally in the financial plan. So the outermost column of the spreadsheet that you have in front of you is essentially what would happen under a favorable override. So what I was envisioning was that you would vote both versions of the budget tonight, and that whatever happens next week, we would be able to roll whichever column, was the correct budget amount into the narrative for the combined reports. So in the restorations for the override, you can see all the departmental budgets where the 682 would be going. You also see the school department appropriation increasing by 5.5 million. The only change from the 682 that was originally presented is the adjustment that Mel mentioned for the mental health program, which then means that we have essentially $26,000 to allocate in a favorable override environment. And in that case, the recommendation is for $10,000 to pavement marking based on the advisory committee subcommittee recommendation. And then the balance would be allocated
Building energy costs.
Thank you, I need my memory refreshed. Based on our consultants' projections of where we think utility costs are going to be related to the solar carve-out charges that we pay. So if there were any changes to the no override budget, we'd have to make a similar adjustment in a favorable override budget as well.
Can I also mention something that really actually dominated most of the discussion with the advisory committee a couple weeks ago, and that was, I think fairly universally, the advisory committee was concerned that in the 3-year override plan, we talk about a number of non-tax revenue enhancements, primarily parking meter rate fees and some other building rental and other things. And the advisory committee was saying, well, why is that not part of Plan B? And I don't think it's necessarily not part of Plan B. I don't think it just hasn't been really developed to that point in time, and I'm quite sure that if the override failed, we would regroup and deal with that at some point. There are a couple of issues with that. First of all, even if we were able to maximize all of those revenues, it only represents a small portion of the overall 3-year override plan, or 3-year funding plan for the schools. And secondly, we had not planned to implement those in year 1. I mean, we would try to do whatever we could to do that, but, for example, the parking meter rates were subject or conditional upon us seeking funding for upgrading the technology of the meters themselves so that they could accept credit cards and so on. We felt that was a package. So if the override fails, I told the advisory committee that I thought the board would embrace some of these other revenue issues, but it would take a little bit of time to sort those out. And bottom line, they're not going to solve the big problem. So that was it.
Was there other revenues besides the parking meters?
The other biggie was the trash.
Yeah. And the trash, we know, is just not ready to roll out.
Yeah, I was gonna
say,
Right, literally roll out.
Well, that will be ready to roll out. I think that one, we feel pretty comfortable with, but it's not it has a multi-year effect. It doesn't
Right.
happen
There
all
there
at
are
once.
startup costs.
Right.
And maybe physically, we might be able to roll it out, but I think there's a fair amount of preparation and communication and education.
And it will take time to
Right.
recover the savings.
Right.
Right.
You're not
Because
going
there
to
are some
see
upfront
revenues.
costs.
So in some of the discussions I've been involved in some of the forums I've been involved in, there's been the notion put forth that the board is holding back on $2.3 million that could be recognized immediately. So if the override were to fail, there'd be this revenue source to hold us over for a year, or hold us over until another override could be put in place. But that also assumes that, well, if we were going to spend at the override level before a new election, that's not prudent. But all that's doing is kind of rearranging the deck chairs a little bit. So, it might provide some small temporary relief, maybe, but we'd have to figure it out.
I think there's especially with the parking meter rates, there's a number of factors. We talked about wanting all of our parking meters to be able to take credit cards if we were raising the rate. We talked about, we've been talking with the merchants. I think we have to talk with them more, because they were suggesting that if we were raising the rate, they wouldn't object, but they wanted us to be less vigorous in our enforcement of people going over on the time. So obviously, if we were to agree to that, that would bring down that projected revenue, and I'm not sure it's something we can agree to. But, so there's some stuff to work out. We would have to have some public hearings on this. I think it's something we could work out within the year, but I wouldn't say we can, do it next week.
I think the simple answer is we fully intend to realize the revenue from increased parking meter rates and the savings from a new trash contract, but there are some implementation costs and concerns that need to be worked out. It's not as though we can snap our fingers and raise the meter rate and decrease the refuse collection costs and just have a pot of money appear. There's some real near-term costs that are going to affect the amount of money that the town would save, either in increased revenue or implementation from cost savings.
Can I just make an observation, and that is, we're obliged to have a balanced budget. In a week, there may be an override that passes, in which case there will be the items that we're talking about will be able to be funded, presumably. There's what I would call a possibility that in 2 weeks' time, with a successful override vote, the budget that can be approved will be the override budget. However, if it's not approved, then we don't have any choice except that at town meeting, it has to be a balanced budget. And therefore, it seems to me, although it's difficult to anticipate what things will be like in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that our obligation, if we choose tonight to vote a budget, is to only vote the budget we can vote, and that's the no override budget. Am I right?
Betsy, I think you can vote both, and I think that's what was done in 2008.
Well, we can vote both, but I'm just saying, I don't think we have the option of not voting the no. We have to vote the no override budget and the override budget, right? We can't not vote the override budget, I think is what double negatives I'm trying to say. Sorry about that.
I've heard a couple of things that are a little disturbing that I feel very strongly about. One is, well, let's let's vote a no override budget without the town side cuts and start dipping into reserves in anticipation of another override vote later on. To me, that's breaking fiscal discipline and is especially irresponsible given the fact that we know we're going to be going into the bond market in a pretty big way in the coming years, and I think it's important that whatever actions we take, that we try to do the best we can to preserve our AAA bond rating and maintain fiscal discipline whether or not the override passes.
I agree with that.
The other thing I've heard is a charge that, you on the sixth floor, you, the selectmen, budget overly conservatively, you're going to have realize more revenue than you're showing in the budget, and cuts don't need to be this bad as a result. And I strongly feel that one of the reasons that the fiscal health of this community is so admirable, and that we're the envy of our brother and sister communities around the Commonwealth, is that we budget responsibly, and we're not caught off guard, and that we always are able to pay our bills and act responsibly, and that's
Not
right.
to mention, we're about to take up budget amendments, and we've got some bad news on snow removal.
Right.
We're in the hole.
Big in the hole, right.
So-
Yeah, and I think Selectman Franco is exactly right. I mean, when 2008 hit and other communities were having to lay off huge numbers of people, we were kind of able to weather the storm because we had been budgeting very carefully, somewhat conservatively. And I think a number of downturns have happened. I mean, you never know when the state government is going to decide to cut aid or something like that. So even if there's, not larger economic issues, that can be statewide economic issues. So I think that maintaining our fiscal policies and adhering to them is very important.
We hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, I think is a fair way to describe it.
And I would second what Selectman Franco said. The fact that we have budgeted conservatively is really the reason we're not freaking out, because we had such high snow removal costs. We can handle it. We have reserves. For those kinds of events, that's what reserves are for. And Wall Street, when they look at municipal budgets, they recognize reserves are there for a reason. And we need to responsibly use those reserves.
And I would further argue that our reserve fund, thank goodness we've got it, because it will in fact substantially address the snow removal cost overruns, which otherwise we would be, like some other communities, having to spread out over multiple years. I think that we have a very long and strong practice of being fiscally prudent, and I see no reason for us to change it. I will say one thing, though, in a sort of a modest way. If there were additional funds found, in the no override version, assuming there must be we have to address the no override scenario, I would hope that if modest funds became available, that we would try to make the mental health budget 100% whole. That would be important priority as far as I'm concerned, because it really is directed to a vulnerable population.
I agree with that. I mean, that would be the first place.
Right.
Right.
If we don't have it, I wouldn't try
available that I
to
would
add it.
Before we go there, I want to tell you that I understand that the $15,000 cut on the mental health is of somewhat minor impact, and I understand that that this came about as a result of the majority of the override study committee. However, having said that, I do not like the optics of it. I do not like the idea that even for $15,000, we are choosing to place that at the doorstep of the population that's most vulnerable in the town. And I would like to ask Mr. Kleckner what we could do to forget about if the money becomes available. What can we do right now to remove those optics?
Well, I would say, first of all, that, the cut of $15,000 is actually an amount that is actually increased from last year. We have been, because we try to increase service contracts by some rate of inflation or some amount, and so this represents an increase over last year. If you're just talking about, keeping it whole from the funding level from last year, it's more like about 12,000. And if you are pursuing that tonight, I would say respectfully that we should be looking at 12,000 and not the 15,000. And if you insist on pursuing that, I would say two areas. One, Melissa mentioned that, the governor submitted some state aid numbers. We put some of it towards health insurance, and we really were not comfortable going any further. I think the House was taking up the budget today. I don't know how they fared. Then the Senate takes up the budget. But if, you were insistent on making a adjustment in the budget, I would say we could take a leap and say we could certify some more revenue from state aid based on the governor's numbers. It's not something I'm totally comfortable with. The other option would be to identify a cut in another budget, and I guess while we're talking about, we're here at the Selectmen's meeting, we have a contingency fund in the Selectmen's budget that handles some miscellaneous expenses and things that are nice, but I suppose they're less important than mental health, and since it's the Selectmen we're talking about, I would identify that. How much is that account?
The contingency fund is $15,000.
So what kinds of
Do you
things?
usually spend it all?
Well,
It varies year to
we use it for, when the board's meeting at very lengthy times, we'll buy food for meetings. We do, based on the Selectmen's status as chief elected officers, we'll often purchase maybe flowers or some other, something for a funeral of a prominent citizen, things like that. It's just miscellaneous expenses that, we do by virtue of the fact that the Selectmen are the chief elected leaders of the community.
We describe it as kind of a reserve fund before you need to go to the reserve fund. So it's for smaller aches and pains that may happen during the year. Sometimes there might be some professional development that a department can't accommodate within their own budget, and if we have the availability, we would do something like that. It varies year to year, though.
Is it the food that's on executive session nights, or is it this other food nights? I mean, I don't think Selectman DeWitt and I want to be responsible for eliminating your food budget for next year, but on the other hand, I would...
Well, I mean, I just do want to point out, though, that I agree with you. We're talking about a very vulnerable population here, and I hate to see this cut, but it's come down substantially from what was first proposed and what the Override Study Committee proposed. And I want to say that we are trying to make cuts on the town side to help, the vulnerable kids in school who need the extra reading help and math help and, some of those services that are going to be eliminated if there's no override. So, I mean, we have a lot of people who need help. I think we have to keep it balanced.
I agree. I mean, I certainly am not happy about the prospect of making a cut to the mental health grant or any of the other cuts proposed, but we need to remember that these cuts, many of them, are the result of recommendations that were made to this board.
Okay.
And these are decisions that are being made in a vacuum.
Okay, then I hear you, and I'm not gonna move that amendment then. Okay? I think I've got...
I think everybody understands, though, that it would be the priority for restoration if
Absolutely.
some
Exactly, yeah.
additional revenues were to be found.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If I could just add one more thing. In addition to the general fund budget, your CIP is also part of this vote. It's at the end, the last page. of the table that you have in front of you. And in terms of the advisory committee, I think the last time I was in front of you last week, they had yet to vote on the gatehouse and energy conservation and school CIP. They're taking up the school CIP tonight, and they voted favorably on the gatehouse and the DPW CIP. And I think that the only thing that they need to double back on is energy conservation at this point.
They voted on the gatehouse?
Yes.
So you're saying that...
It's close, but they voted favorably.
This is now consistent with the advisory committee, the CIP?
So far.
So far?
For everything that's been
Oh,
voted.
but they haven't voted everything. Okay, I got it. All right, because I was going to put in a word for the gatehouse.
So, Melissa, it seems like you said a few minutes ago, there are a couple changes we do need to note from this document, right?
Right. So, just in revenue, the only change there would be the state aid, and that was done to accommodate the group health appropriation and the mental, the health department appropriation. So, I probably should have highlighted that, I apologize. So, the state aid number, the health department, and group health are really the only changes that you would see on this.
So...
When you say health department, you're referring to the mental health?
Yeah,
mental health.
It's within the health.
I'm sorry,
department.
are they the changes are
Yes.
reflected in
Yes.
this?
So what you
They're in
see-
here already?
Correct.
Okay. I thought we might have to amend our...
Okay, so on this spreadsheet, it's incorporated, and therefore, where we see a change difference, the change has already accounted for the adding to the mental health contract.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. It's a little confusing.
Okay. Any other changes to the town administrator's budget that we want to talk about before putting this to a vote? And again, we're going to have two votes. We're going to vote the without override budget vote and then the with override budget. No? Okay. I'm not sure how to refer to this document as we do it.
Maybe A and B or something like that?
Table?
Yeah.
Or table one, that's how
Table
town
one?
meeting.
Table 1, is that what we're calling it?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
document? Okay. So I'm going to make the first motion, and the first motion is that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on the town administrator's budget, which is Table 1 in our packet for this evening, and specifically the fiscal year 2016 without override budget.
Bottom line, $243,797,585.
Well, you're only voting on the amount that town meeting appropriates, which is 235.
Oh, okay, the 235 line,
$2
sorry.
million,
Sorry.
the total appropriation would be $235,609, no, I'm sorry, $235,609,249.
249, yes, right, it's hard to get
Or
that.
just the table as presented is just as
Yeah.
easy as well.
All in favor of that?
I think that big number is something that needs to be said out loud.
Yep.
Sorry.
All in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I'll also vote aye. I'd also like to move that we recommend favorable action on the town administrator's fiscal year 2016 budget as depicted in Table 1 of our packet with respect to the FY16 with override appropriations, which total...
This is the contingent budget if the
Right.
override
With-
passes.
So, contingent on the override passing, and for a total appropriation of $241,782,517. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Congratulations, we got a
you all.
vote.
Thank you, Melissa.
Not too often we can vote $200 million.
That's what I meant, say the number out loud, it's a big one.
Let's move on to agenda item 14, which is reconsideration of board's prior votes for the May 26, 2015 annual town meeting. The first is, as I alluded to a few moments ago, budget amendments to the FY15 budget. And Ms. Goff?
Good evening. So I'm asking the board to reconsider Article 7, which is the FY15 budget amendment. I think at the time that this was presented, we were really hopeful that we would be getting additional funding from FEMA beyond the first storm, and now we've received the news that that is not the case. Fortunately, we've identified funding within the overlay reserve that the Board of Assessors would need to vote to release. So at this point, I wouldn't have a motion ready for you until the board actually takes that vote to release the funds, and then we would make a motion to appropriate. A couple of things that would be changing, and I would think that we probably would have a better number closer to town meeting. We are currently anticipating that we would get $400,000 back from FEMA. At the time, last week, we had a $3.4 million deficit, and I know that Andy is thoroughly looking at the expenditures within the snow removal budget and trying to pare that number down a little bit, just to make sure that, you know, all the bills are in and that we've got everything accounted for. So I would hope that that number would come down a little bit, but I would need Andy to finish his analysis in order to say for certain. There's 1.6 that I'm projecting we could use from the reserve fund. The reserve fund balance is about 1.8 million at this time. But I don't want to say that the entire amount can be dedicated to snow, because I think that we have already heard from Pat Ward that he's going to need something for his departmental budget. I know that Bill McGrody is potentially going to be coming in front of you for an increase as well. And I want to give a thorough look at some other departmental accounts before I say, you know, what else could be available for snow and ice. But I think 1.6 is a fair amount at this point. And then the estimate provided by Gary McCabe was 1.1 for the overlay. Obviously, we won't know the final number until the Board of Assessors, and I think they are meeting tonight. And we have made a request for them to release anything that is in surplus. And that would leave us with a shortfall of approximately $300,000, which we would hope that we would be able to address within the DPW budget based on salary savings from regular turnover that they have during the year. So all I'm really looking for is for you to just reopen Article 7, and then we could incorporate a narrative that would explain what we're doing so that town meeting is more informed.
So voted for reconsideration tonight, but not actually...
And then just hold the vote,
but actually
yeah.
voted.
Well,
Okay.
And, you know, the discussion that you were having about conservative budgeting practices, and this is definitely, you know, snow and ice kept me awake for a while when I first started, so I think that having a solution like this has been really important, but also, you know, on the revenue side, you know, this just shows the expenditure side of the ledger, but we did get some hits in revenue as well, and I think the conservative budgeting practices definitely have helped us with just weathering, pun intended, this whole storm.
And other communities have had to do things like push the expenses into other fiscal years and make cuts in other fiscal years.
So DOR is allowing communities to carry it over, I think, for 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
But as I said to advisory committee, I just rather take my pain all at once.
I will say, I was with some communities today talking about this, and there's one community who is requesting the state to allow them to borrow money over a period of time, amortize this cost, which I don't think the state will allow, but, you know, it just goes to show how difficult when something like this happens, of this magnitude, that it's so important to have the reserves. And if you read the Boston Globe today, the rating agencies are paying attention.
Yeah.
And they should.
You noticed.
Yes.
Okay, so
As
just...
daunting as this problem is, I mean, I can't help but thinking of what's going on in Nepal right now.
Oh,
and
right.
the impacts on
They have
on their
no way of-
already impoverished economy.
Sure, yeah.
It will take them decades to recover from it, so I think we need to recognize our fortunate position.
I don't want to say this facetiously,
World.
but I think there will be international contributions to Nepal. I don't imagine we're going to have any for Brookline.
That's true. Any further comment or discussion about? Great. I move that the board reconsider its vote on warrant Article 7 for the May 26, 2015 annual town meeting. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. and now intend to hold that vote and discussion for a later meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is possible reconsideration of the board's vote on warrant Article 9, the proposal by Mr. Fry to extend at-large town meeting membership. Mr. Fry, Mr. Spiegel, if you want to join us too.
Oh,
What's that? You can both come in, share the microphone. Good.
Hi, Ernie Fry, Precinct 7. I would say that since Mr. Spiegel has moved the motion that's under consideration that prompted this, your placing this on the meeting agenda tonight, he should have the first word.
Okay. That means you get the last word.
I really prefer the last word, but I'll take any word I can get. Stanley Spiegel, excuse me, no word. Precinct 2 town meeting member of the advisory committee and all that stuff, and author of a substitute motion under Article 9. And I believe you all have seen copies of it. Is that fair? So I don't need to elaborate terribly much because it's fairly straightforward.
With some tweaks, right?
A tweak, yes. It's been
Which the
tweaked
group
a little.
doesn't have.
Well, let me give you the tweaks as well as the motion, if I may. The thrust of it is to give the office holders named in warrant Article 9, which would have afforded them at-large town meeting status, instead to afford them honorary town meeting member status. The distinction being that as honorary town meeting members, they would, as in the words of the motion, receive an invitation to and all official correspondence relating to articles that would come before town meeting, but not have the privilege of voting on those articles. And the tweaks, besides naming the folks who would be entitled to this status if the motion passes and the bylaw passes, I had originally concluded with folks who are residents of the town of Brookline. But I added, and the moderator approved, the phrase, "and who are not elected or at-large town meeting members." The reason being that elected or at-large town meeting members, and certainly our state treasurer could run for town meeting, our state rep could run for town meeting because they're both residents of the town. And if they were to run as town meeting members on their own, then they would have the vote because they'd be regular town meeting members. But this, if passed, and we didn't exclude them from the category of honorary town meeting members, would be claimed not to have the vote. And that ambiguity is worth resolving. So if they decide to run and become elected as town meeting members, they would forswear they would not be entitled to being called honorary town meeting members, but if, as is present, our state treasurer and our representative in Congress, these being the only two who would qualify right now, and if this passes, they would become honorary town meeting members without the vote, the right to vote at town meeting. And the purpose of doing this, frankly, is to try to avoid a contentious debate and possible defeat at town meeting, given that the Board of Selectmen has nearly unanimously voted favorable action on town meeting member Fry's article. The advisory committee has near unanimous recommendation for no action, which to me seems that there will therefore be a debate. It may be a contentious debate. And if the objective, as I believe it is to give some tribute to these people who have achieved high elected office, the last thing you want to do is have a debate. You don't give somebody an honor and then discuss it and decide, no, they don't get the honor. Yeah, they do. That's quite the antithesis of affording these folks a sort of tribute, which I believe was the intent of the article to begin with. And my hope was, if the Board of Selectmen will modify its vote, reconsider and accept this as an amendment, which Ernie Fry can speak for himself, but my understanding is that he is now supportive of this motion for the reasons, he joins me in the reasons that I just stated. And in private conversations with State Treasurer Goldberg, she's quite content. In fact, she would not like to see a contentious debate. She, as I explained to her the reasons for making this motion, she was a jump ahead of me. She'd rather there be no action on it than have this be subject to some sort of heated or contentious debate on the floor of town meeting. She doesn't want that. And those of us who care about giving these people a tribute, which I think they deserve on the basis of their accomplishments, I don't want this either. I trust some may, but I don't, and I hope you don't. So that's the reason for the amendment. It's a simple amendment. It doesn't change anything in the nature of the way the town runs. That is, the people who would get this honor cannot vote. As citizens of the town, they certainly could be recognized by the moderator, as could any citizen of the town, to engage in the debate or discussion. And frankly, my sense is that if the state treasurer or a congressperson who was attended wished and indicated to the moderator or wished to address the body, it seems to me, you can't predict, but most moderators that I can think of would be happy to extend that privilege to address the body, although not to vote. So it really isn't doing anything to destroy or disturb the structure of town meeting. It bestows some degree of recognition. I will tell you, because this happened just tonight, the subcommittee of the advisory committee, which was considering this, did not vote a favorable recommendation. They voted no action and perhaps referral to CTO&S. However, the full advisory committee will be taking this up on Thursday, and I would think there's at least a reasonable chance that some of us might be able to persuade the full advisory committee to vote favorable action, but who knows? In any case, tonight, my hope is that the Board of Selectmen will do that, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Spiegel. Mr. Fry?
As Mr. Spiegel has voiced, yes, indeed, he has properly recited my opinion on this, is that I fully support this amendment. I think it adds a lot more to the amendment, and I think it gives it a much better chance of achieving the equanimity and honors or the the recognition that we intended to give to these individuals. And yes, I do fully endorse it, and I was at the subcommittee meeting when they voted on this, and he is reporting everything correctly as far as I can say.
Okay. Any discussion from members of the board? I support the warrant article too, the amendment as well, and for the reasons that you stated. I think it's politically expedient and politically sensitive, and accomplishes the purpose that Mr. Fry set out to at the same time. Further discussions? Okay.
I'm ready to vote it.
I move that we reconsider the board's previous vote on warrant Article 9 for the May 26, 2015 annual town meeting. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And I move that we recommend favorable action on the substitute motion under Article 9 offered by Mr. Spiegel, which is included in our packages 14-3 with the following amendment to the amendment, that where it says the following officers inserted is the language who are not elected or at-large town meeting members. I get that correct? All those in favor of the, it's okay, I think I got it. Yeah.
Kate, give it to Kate, that's important.
All those in favor of the substitute motion as amended, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
luck with
Stan.
your votes, Mr. Spiegel.
Yes, now go persuade the advisory committee.
Oh, yeah, they love
Right, good luck.
Nothing but respect for
That's
what the
right.
Board of Selectmen does.
Advisory Committee
We've been
always
so popular this,
loves to follow our lead. Not.
Possible reconsideration of warrant article number 18, the eminent domain article that was brought by Ms. Frowley. The proposed reconsideration comes about as a result of town council's recommendation that as opposed to, I've lost the language, I'm afraid, as opposed to...
The Neil Washinsky language?
Thank you.
Right.
Well, what we need to do is move reconsideration.
Yeah, but let's talk about why, though. So
Well, it
Selectman
started because...
Waschinsky, why don't you tell us?
Yeah,
It's your motions.
after our vote, there seemed to be some confusion as to what we voted. The way it was framed as as an affirmative motion of favorable action, it failed, well, we think it failed 0-2 to 3 abstentions. There was some back and forth. Town council believed that it failed for lack of...
203.
2-0. Yes, 2-0.
203, yes.
2
sorry.
yes, 0 no, 3 abstentions.
Town council felt that it failed for lack of a majority, but to take all ambiguity away from that vote and to really express what we were trying to say, I thought it would be prudent for us to have an affirmative motion saying exactly what we were trying to express. And that's the language you see here, which is moved that, consistent with the board's long-standing interest in protecting the so-called green belt at Hancock Village, to best preserve options seeking to advance this interest and not take any actions which may adversely affect pending litigation. The board takes no action, no position with respect to the subject matter of Article 18 at this time. And town council has reviewed that language and
Makes sense to me, although it's very different from the format that we usually see the selectmen's votes reported in the combined reports. So,
But it does have the possibility of getting a unanimous vote of the Board of Selectmen.
It does have that
It does.
possibility. So, any further discussion before I put it to a vote for reconsideration? No? Ms. Frawley, do you want to speak on it? It's kind of, this is pretty much a formality, so.
I understand, and I actually have no problem with your position. I understand it perfectly.
Okay.
And I think it is, last week somebody said prudent, and I think it is prudent. But just in terms of motions, I think only 2 of them could make the motions. The 2 that said yes, either Betsy or Ben. You can't. So they're the only 2 who can move it and second it.
That's a fine point, I like that. What do you
But it
move
is in fact the correct one.
Yeah, it's good mastery of a fine point, I like that.
I think, did we vote the reconsideration already?
Not yet.
No, we
Selectman
haven't.
Franco seems like he was about to do
I'll move
that.
everything. Put a motion in front of me and I'll move it.
Well, you have to move reconsideration first.
I'll move reconsideration of our previous vote on Article 18.
All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
I vote aye.
Now make your,
I will move the motion that Selectman Waschinsky articulated. It's an email dated Sunday, April 26, 2015, at 8:53 a.m.
let's see what I was doing on Sunday morning.
Yes.
Oh, we're not going to read it again?
I'll read it again.
Okay, read it.
Consistent with the board's longstanding interest in protecting the so-called green belt at Hancock Village, to best preserve options seeking to advance this interest and not to take any actions which may adversely affect pending litigation, the board takes no position with respect to the subject matter of Article 18 at this time.
All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And I also vote aye.
Could I ask a question? When is that case going to be heard, and where?
Which case, I'm sorry?
Your case. When-
I'm not
I
sure.
heard it was sometime in May, but I'm not...
June. June? I don't have a date, just in June.
Okay.
Is what I,
Send an email to town council.
yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, send an email to town council, she might be able to tell you.
She'd love to hear from you.
Oh, sure.
All right, Selectman Franco left at an inopportune
Uh-oh,
moment
you
there.
can't,
We need his,
he's got to come back.
yeah, we need him back.
Well, you can say what it is,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
we
So,
can accuse ourselves.
final agenda item is continuation of the public hearing on the application of Rawson Road Public Parking LLC, Rawson Road Parking LLC for a license to conduct and maintain an open-air parking lot with an area of about 10,200 square feet at 195 Rawson Road for 20 automobiles. And
I am
go
going to
ahead.
recuse myself because I have a financial involvement with the Claflin Path Association.
And I'm going to recuse myself because of a business relationship with a party in interest. And Selectman DeWitt.
Well, I guess we'll have to hold the fort.
Yeah, why don't you
Well,
hold it down?
we need to wait for
Yes,
Selectman
we have
Franco to come back.
Yes, we will definitely wait for Selectman Franco.
Okay, sounds good.
Because we need a quorum.
Sure.
It's all right.
I've never been so needed in my life.
Right. I wouldn't call it desperately, but certainly required. Okay, we are continuing the public hearing on the application of Rawson Road Parking LLC, Andrew Gordon, manager, for a license to conduct and maintain an open-air parking lot with an area of about 10,240 square feet at 195 Rawson Road for 20 automobiles. All right.
That's correct. So just to update you in terms of what happened today, so I did receive a phone call today from Dan Bennett, the building commissioner.
Building commissioner, yes.
He asked me a few questions. Few of them I had answers to. I ended up emailing him around 3:30, the information that I had. I'm not sure if it made it to you
Okay.
folks. Okay. So his questions were the number of striped spaces that are currently there. Again, we're just the applicant at this point. We don't own the property yet, but our understanding is there's more than 20, which clearly is in violation of the, of what's happening with the license. It's only for 20. So we would obviously, our plan is to remill this whole parking lot and set it up according to the license, have 20 striped parking spaces and rent those out. The next question he had for me was there's a retaining wall that's at the back of this particular lot. If you would give me the permission, I can walk up to you folks and kind of give you an idea of the map. I gave this to you guys last.
Do you have actually a survey of this parcel? Because we have a variety of drawings, not any one of them is an accurate survey drawing.
I have a survey, but it doesn't show the striped parking spaces.
Okay.
So my understanding as well is some of the parking spaces are clearly marked, some are not. It's sort of a mixed bag of what it looks
Well,
like.
how about this? For the moment, it's more important that you understand that the maximum number is 20. And that going forward, as a condition of the license, the number is 20. And Mr. Bennett observed more than 20. So it will be a condition of the license that the number of parking spaces be 20. And we don't need to discuss it, as long as in the end, it's only 20.
We agree, it'll only be 20.
Okay, all right. But there were other questions that were raised having more to do with access than number of striped spaces. I mean, we can agree about the number of spaces that are permitted. The access, however, is much more confusing, as near as I can tell, from the narrative we heard at the last meeting. The legal access is from 195 Rawson Road, but there seems to be another access point that connects from the parking area to the, I don't know what it is, whether it's an actual right-of-way, but to...
It's a passageway.
A passageway, which may or may not be a legal right-of-way, that permits access to Claflin Path and thence to Addington Road, which is not on any drawing we have, and therefore not part of the parcel that was given its original permit.
I can help clear some of this stuff up.
Okay.
So If I can just, it might be easier just to show you with
Yep.
respect to the legal documents. So I'm going to give you sort of the abridged version, because I think that's probably...
Okay, you need to understand that in a public hearing, you still have to talk into a microphone because otherwise,
Understood.
nobody can hear you.
So with respect to access, okay,
Yep.
that's the issue. There's two points of access to this particular parking lot. One of them is off Rawson Road. The other one is off what's being called Claflin Path.
Claflin Path, right.
Okay, so this particular site plan here that I'm showing you, it'll show you Rawson Road. So this is...
Yeah, here's
This is
Rawson
Rawson
Road.
Road.
This is
Here's-
195.
Exactly. Here's the access point
Mhm.
between the two buildings, and here's the parking lot that would have the 20 parking spaces. There's also another access point, and that access point shows up here on this plan. You'll see the dotted line. It's slightly more difficult to see, but it's through, I'm sorry. It's through,
It's here.
exactly, so here's the parking lot, and there's a right-of-way. It's a 10-foot right-of-way to be used for either vehicles or by foot to cut across this land onto the passageway.
It's
That's-
noted on deeds.
This is, it's an of record.
Okay.
And it's noted on this
Okay.
particular deed.
Okay, all right. Now, just to be
Sorry.
clear, in the special permit sketch, which is the information that we received.
Sure.
There is no record of that access point. And also to be clear, that on our assessor's map, there is also no acknowledgement of that access point. And therefore, we have no knowledge that that access point exists legally without your documentation.
Okay, so how, and would you like us to
I
have a
think
new
we
plan?
need
Is
new
that what you're
plans.
looking
I
for?
think we need a plan that correctly, accurately indicates the parcel and its means of access.
Okay. But the parking lot itself, though, the license to park the 20 parking spaces is not per se contingent about the access to the Claflin path, right? I mean, the license is for
Well,
the parking, so the access points, now, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I'm not sure how relevant they are to
To the extent
giving an
that
application.
abutters object, it's relevant.
But I don't know if I don't know if, I mean, they objected last week about the current state of the plowing of a lot of things that were outside the four corners of the application. Like, they had to do more with the current owner, and we plan on making this a better place and making it more attractive. We plan on milling the entire parking area, restriping it properly, and working with the Claflin Path Association and making a, reasonable contribution to those folks.
Okay.
So, because of the use of the pathway.
All right.
So we want to be a good neighbor.
And I want you to be a good neighbor, but I also do not want any more misleading, inaccurate plans. I
I'm
want
not-
to have an accurate plan that reflects the parcel and its access points to be attached to any vote we take with a license, so that in the future, you and I and some future person do not have this conversation. I may agree that you can provide it as a supplement. We could vote it on the condition that a plan be provided.
Sure.
I don't know that I have to have it right now, but I do not ever want to do this again with you or any future parcel owner. Okay?
Fair enough.
Good. You feel like you were trying to say something.
Yeah, no, I,
Stand here, do we?
no, you.
No, I think it's okay. Can we keep these? For the voters, yeah?
The building, I emailed it to Dan as well.
Okay, all right, so
he-
Dan
he
has them.
he
Okay,
has
that's good, that's good, that's very important.
So, where I thought you were heading,
Right.
where I thought you were heading was holding the vote again, which...
But I'm trying not to.
Right, exactly. I don't
Trying not to hold the
want to
vote.
hold the vote.
Trying not to.
So if, make it with a condition. I saw someone wanted to...
Well, yeah, we'll certainly let people speak. There were other issues that came up that may have to do with landscaping and things like that. I'm just trying at the moment to ascertain the boundaries of the parcel and the access points to it. Okay, Selectman Franco, do you have any comment you want to make at this
No,
moment?
not at this time.
Okay, having cleared up at least that we will be able to get a proper plan, are there members of the public who wish to speak or comment on this application for a license for 20 parking spaces?
My name is John Maneris. I'm the acting treasurer of the Claflin Path Association. I'd like to begin with an apology to the board in that we, Mr. Daly and myself, presented what turned out to be an inaccurate map last week. It was not up to date. We had in fact obtained it through the town, but it was not up to date and did not have this data on it. So my apologies for that.
You're forgiven. It's not the first time.
Thank you very much. Number two, this is the pen I left here last week, and I'm taking it with me. It was stolen from the lodge at Vale, and I'm taking it home. Okay. Although I am not the property owner involved, I have long speculated that even in the absence of the easement which is being discussed, there may very well be solid grounds for a prescriptive easement in this case, in that we believe that it has been at least 30 years that the traffic has exited that lot into Claflin Path. And even in the absence of an easement of record, there might very well be a very good case for a prescriptive easement. That having been said, we've had some discussions outside this chamber with the prospective owner council, and we are, at least for the time satisfied as to their good intent. They've undertaken that they will work with us to take care of the snow issues, to plow, to make contribution to the exit plowing and so on. So certainly we're now, I will say, withdrawing our contention and objections for the time being.
Okay, well, that's great.
Okay? We still haven't settled on exactly the meaning of reasonable.
Okay. All right, then, gentlemen, do you have any other comments that you want to make or questions? Yep.
So, and to conclude with that, we would be comfortable with a conditional yes vote, which I think that you were driving towards, saying a conditional yes vote subject to receipt of an adequate plan would wrap it up rather than causing them to
and
appear again.
I'm even prepared to say that, unless my colleagues disagree, that the plan could be one which includes indication of parking layout, which you may or may not have at this moment, but would be very helpful to everybody if, when it's submitted, the parking layout is included on the plan. All right.
Striping.
Right, striping, yeah, right. So I'm saying I would like to have the approval on the condition that we get an accurate and complete plan which would include the access points as well as the parking striping. And that could be submitted subsequently, but not required at the moment.
Andrew Gordon, who is
Yep.
the manager of the...
Mr. Gordon, please just identify yourself for the public.
Andrew Gordon, I am the, applicant.
Yep.
On the striping, we want to first, through one season, figure out where to put the snow. I know that it's been a big bone of contention with all the neighbors. So in terms of the striping, can I get some time to...
How about this? Provide us with a proposed striping plan.
Perfect.
This license will be up for annual review, and at your annual review, submit your real striping plan, and that would be satisfactory.
Great.
But I think it's really important that it be on record. Okay?
Fine.
if that satisfies.
Yes, and then once we have a better defined plan of
Sure.
where the snow is going to go, that everybody will be happy, we
Sure.
can make that a permanent
Yeah.
annual.
One thing that turned up on the plans that I saw and doesn't appear in all of the drawings, and therefore I'm hoping will be clarified when we get the survey, is there seems to be a little bite that appears to be an extension of the parcel into an area that's equal to the space that would be one parking space. And I don't know whether you're aware of that or not, but...
Is it okay if I just approach and just see?
Oh, yeah,
I
sure.
I don't know what you mean by...
Come here, I'll show it to you. No, well, I don't know what the right word for it is. It's that, and it appears, strangely, it appears in, this is the 1977,
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, right.
That...
What is that?
That is actually just open, that is a parking, that's just parking. I don't know why they've diagrammed it like that.
Okay.
If I was to show you a picture of it, that's just part of the lot.
Okay,
I
but
think
it
what was there
is
years
included
ago,
in the parcel.
That is
Yeah.
absolutely
It is-
included in the
okay.
parcel.
It's
I
part
think
of it.
that
Part
was
of
a
the
garage.
business.
That's what I was told.
Okay,
You may know
all right.
better, but I was told
Don't know
that was
the
a
answer.
garage that was demolished years ago.
Okay.
Now it's paved over. So
Okay.
that is part of the parcel.
All right, but that's part of the parcel. All right, fine.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
That answers my question. Okay, we ready to do this, guys?
Yeah, let's do it.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak from the public? Oh, don't think so. All right.
These become much easier when the butters are happy.
Absolutely. Well, so I am going to move, let's see if I've got some language, that we approve an open-air parking license at 195 Rawson Road with the conditions that currently apply in the license dated June 17th, 2014, which includes keeping entrance and parking spaces passable and clear of excess snow at all times, et cetera. And with the condition that a complete and accurate plan, including proposed striped parking spaces, be submitted by the applicant in a timely manner, and with the understanding that when there is an application to renew the license, a final striped plan for the parking spaces will accompany that application. Is that clear to everybody? Okay.
There may have been some,
Are there any
there may have been
other?
some other conditions in Mr. Bennett's.
Oh, and
recent-
according to whatever conditions have been
I don't know
specified
to
by
what
the
extent
building
they're
department.
different
Yeah.
from the
Right.
existing conditions, but at least reference them and we'll sort it out.
Yeah, right. Whatever the building department, planning department, or fire department have required.
Do
But I don't
do we
think
know
there's
what those are with all?
Well, I'm just looking through here to see if there's anything,
I have, let's see.
I read it before, but it didn't seem to me that it was such, building department is 20 vehicles with dimension,
Okay, planning.
Should maintain landscaping.
yeah, but that's part of the current license.
Retain plant screen in front of spaces 1 through 15. This area should be cleaned, fences repaired, replaced, and landscaping restored. Also, there have been new retaining walls constructed along the property line with some landscaping. So I don't know to what extent those reference the existing conditions or not.
You going to put that into the license?
I wouldn't. I'm concerned that if they restripe the parking spaces, these comments may no longer apply.
Why don't we say something like...
So what do you wanna do?
Just favorable inspection?
Well, I mean, we're not clear, I guess, I heard your description, it's just not clear to me, or the applicant, what exactly would be required in terms of the landscape, what you just described, the landscaping.
All right, you,
Retain the plant screen in front of spaces 1 through 15.
right, excepting, we don't know where spaces 1 through 15 are going to be. That's what I was concerned about. the recommendations that we have were based, I guess, on the existing layout.
So how about something like with conditional on the approval by the Assistant Director of Regulatory Planning on the proposed parking map?
This is from Dan Bennett, so. it'd be
It's
from
the building commissioner.
I mean, can we add in there that we'll work with Dan on this? Because it's just not clear to us what is being asked as a condition. I mean, we're
why
happy
don't we
to work
say
with you guys, but we just don't know.
Something like, upon approval of the building commissioner of
Yeah, well, if
plans, I don't
we
know.
just assume that the final plans have to have the approval of the building commissioner, then you can work with him.
Right, but just doesn't put us in a position of, I mean, our purchase of this parking lot is conditioned on having a license. If there's conditions subsequent that we can't meet, then we don't have a license. I mean, the special permit contains conditions about snow removal, keeping the Rossin Road access into the parking lot clear and properly paved. I get all that. That's reasonable in my mind, and I believe in the applicant's mind. But in terms of, of landscaping, my understanding is there's really none existing at this point in time, and there may not be the ability to get it in there without having more specifics. So is it possible to, at the renewal, I guess we could discuss these further issues?
I'm just concerned if there's another layer of approval. If the building commissioner says, hey, we just need some clarity, because if we get the license and we're going to submit the 20 space, I just have to know what we're buying. And I'm not trying to be flippant, or I just don't know what to do.
I think he didn't understand at the time that there was a legal right-of-way there. And that does make a difference in terms of having access. So there's been a fair amount of learning process going on.
Well, the special permit that was issued in 1976 does reference landscaping.
Sure, and I'm assuming that they still have to provide landscaping, but we
It
don't
also-
know where it
So
will
why don't
be
we
yet.
why don't we just say the conditions of the permit of
Yeah, I
the
mean,
special
they
permit
have to
dated-
fulfill the conditions of the special permit.
And then,
Well, and that would be reasonable, because.
Fine, currently those conditions indicate that final landscaping plans should be submitted, but, I think you'll find, Mr. Bennett, it's very reasonable, and I don't think there will be an issue there, but if you do cite the zoning board of appeals case and conditions, I suppose that would cover it, at least for the time being.
Yeah, if it's compliant with the special permit and
That's fine, because we're
the
subject to.
licensing conditions.
right.
Okay, so, Kate, do you want to start this one all over again, or are you following our modifications? Then, Selectman Franco and Selectman Waschinsky, are you in agreement about what we're voting? It's the special permit conditions, the licensing conditions, and the requirement that an accurate plan be submitted. Those are the components. Are we good with that?
An accurate plan that shows both the right-of-way
Right.
and a proposed
And the proposed
striping.
parking striping, right. Okay? Kate, are you with it? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Selectman Waschinsky.
Aye.
Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Or, no, I'm not the chair, but anyway.
Acting chair.
Acting chair votes aye. Okay, I think you have your license.
Thank you. Should I connect with Ms. Costello tomorrow? Deborah?
Oh,
Yeah.
Brenda.
I'm sorry, Brenda, my apologies.
Connect with Brenda.
I don't,
Mr. Bennett.
yeah, I think you should speak to Mr. Bennett and Ms. Costello. She's the one who will produce the license. which then has to be signed. It's not going to be tomorrow.
It's going to be ready tomorrow.
I suspect it will not be tomorrow.
The only reason I'm asking is this is contingent upon a number of other,
Yep.
of the
Right,
purposes
and what
there.
I can tell you is that the license physically has to be produced. It doesn't exist right now.
Sure.
So if you speak to Ms. Costello, she will be able to tell you when it will be available.
Okay,
And I
excellent.
can't tell you what that is.
Understood, thank you.
All set?
All set.
All right, so that concludes our business, except for one thing. So as we mentioned, this is Selectman DeWitt's and my last meetings, and I would like...
Why don't you let me do my send-off to both of you first,
Oh.
and then I'll give you the last word.
Okay.
In a last act of generosity.
Thank you, Ben.
So I want to, again, I apologize for my tardiness. I got stuck in some traffic, but I do want to say some kind words about our departing colleagues and wish them well in their retirement. Hopefully, this isn't the last time we're going to see their faces, but wanted to compliment the estimable Empress of licensing obligations for her detail-oriented analysis, and I think this last discussion we had is a good example of that. And this is a job certainly where the little things matter, and I want to applaud and thank you for your attention to those details. And I also want to compliment you on your steadfast and passionate advocacy of your point of view. It's certainly helped all of us come to better decisions, and it's something that I hope you continue to keep up and make your opinion known to all of us who are going to continue on the board. And now...
I know why you were late. I think you were writing that.
I was. And to the Admiral of the towering Fisher Hill, I want to compliment you on your commitment, your continued commitment to the town and to improving the town, even when you faced some hard times and were the subject of some unfair and unwarranted criticism. I also want to compliment and thank you for your willingness to listen to all points of view and help us craft the best decision possible, even in the face of some difficult situations. So both of you will be missed, at least by me, and again, hopefully you'll stay in touch and continue to appear before this board and remain involved in town affairs.
Thank you, Ben.
I want to say, if anyone's watching who wasn't watching at the beginning, that Selectman Waschinsky and I said some nice things.
Yeah, very nice.
But they'll be missed by all of us.
Almost as nice as Selectman Franco's things. Selectman DeWitt, do you have any parting words for us?
Well, I didn't actually prepare anything, but I will say this, that I have felt in my 9 years on this board a great opportunity to work with people with whom one can agree and agree to disagree from time to time, and that's very important. It seems to me that the experience that I've had over my tenure has been, we've not been without our controversies, but we have managed always to come back together and to be a team. And a good thing about a team is shared strengths. Each person brings something different to the table. And I have to compliment Selectman Goldstein in particular for getting us out earlier. I never could do that. I don't know how he does it, but he's managed to keep us moving through our agendas, and that's very important. And I have to say that I'm sort of looking forward to Tuesday nights. I might even watch it on video, for all I know. I'll have to decide whether I'm addicted or not. But it's been a very rewarding experience, and I'm sad to go, but I'm also ready to go, and looking forward to seeing the new select people and hoping that they will be successful.
We'll see you at town meeting also.
With luck.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
both of you are
Both of
running,
you,
right?
yes.
Yeah, I'm happen to be unopposed, so unless there's
Okay.
a
All right.
write-in campaign, I'll probably be okay.
Okay, well, we'll definitely be seeing you. You're opposed?
Well, there are
6 or
incumbent
5.
candidates, so
Oh.
I'm the sixth candidate, and I will even say publicly and respectfully, I'm not campaigning, you know. I'm just going to put my name up, and if enough people vote for me, I will be at town meeting.
Okay.
Well, I want to say how much I've enjoyed my last 6 years doing this, truly, truly enjoyed it, and just about every moment of it, in fact. And if I can just, for a second, tell you how, people come up to me all the time and they say, well, why would you do that? That's got to be the most thankless job on earth. And I always say, you know what, it's not true. I get thanked all the time, and that's one of the reasons for doing it. And sometimes you're thanked for things you don't deserve to be thanked for, and you're not thanked for things that you think you should be thanked for, but regardless, you do get thanked. But the main reason I do it is not for, well, people also think you do it for business. I don't do it for business. I didn't do it for business. It actually hurt business more than it helped business. And
Right.
But I won't go into that. I did it for entertainment value, okay? Honestly, we got town meeting coming up. I always call town meeting a night at the theater myself. And this is for every Tuesday night for the past 6 years has been fascinating. It's been intellectually stimulating and fascinating. And it's fascinating and stimulating because of people like Mel Kleckner and people like Rich Kelleher and people like Sean Cronin and people like Betsy DeWitt and Nancy Daly and Ben Franco and Neil Wyshynski and Dick Banker and Jesse Mermel and all of our department heads, like people who are experts. This town has got incredible resource of intelligence, and I always say, like, I can't come into any meeting on any subject in this town thinking I've got the answer on it, because if the meeting is about trash collection, there's somebody with a PhD of trash collection in that room.
Yeah.
And, I've always viewed the job of the selectmen, and this is probably unique to Brookline, is not so much having the answers, but being able to manage the incredible intellectual resources that are available to you. And it's truly been a privilege and an entertainment to be doing that for 6 years. So you haven't seen the last of me. I'll be at town meeting, hopefully, and I will volunteer my efforts wherever they're needed. So keep me in mind if you ever see a need for
I think we
it.
have some slots on some of our commissions and boards and things, so I'm so glad you said that.
That concludes our business for this evening. See you in 2 weeks. No Board of Selectmen meeting next week.
Thursday, right.